when you have a child, you care more than anyone else about that child. You're caring about their long-term success and happiness and their health. If you look at just a first principles basis, what is the school interested in? What is the state interested in? But it's more about compliance and conformity. It's not about creativity. It's not about critical thinking. It is conformity and compliance.
What is up, guys? Welcome back to Bitcoin Audible. I am Guy Swan, the guy who has read more about Bitcoin than anybody else you know. This show is brought to you by Swan Bitcoin, the best place to get started in Bitcoin. Whether you're buying your first Bitcoin and you want to just do it easily and quickly, whether you want to set up an IRA and invest with tax-free retirement, or set up your business, or you want a long-term plan, or you're a large net worth investor and you just want to make a huge purchase, Swan has your back. And of course, they have an incredible list of resources to learn literally anything you want to know about it. And of course, this show is also brought to you by not losing your keys like an idiot, thanks to CoinKite, who make the cold card hardware wallet. You need to keep your Bitcoin safe. You need to know that you own it. And there is nothing better than a hardware wallet like the Cold Card or the number of other fantastic security devices that CoinKite has. Links and details to all of that will be in the show notes. Now, this is a conversation I've been thinking about for a while, and I've been meeting and chatting with Tali and Scott for at least a number of weeks, ever since BitBlock Boom, basically. And we've been discussing a number of different things around the projects that they are working on, but I've never really gone into homeschooling and self-custody parenting, so to speak, on this show before. And there's a level of Bitcoin education that I feel like we are failing at, that we have really missed a massive opportunity on. And this is the focus that I think they have. I think they see something and they're trying to fill in a market need that we have not properly understood how important it is, at least in my opinion. And I partly try to make that case during this show. But on one thing that Scott and Tali have done, Scott has designed the HODL Up game. If you've never played that, it is a game. Don't think of it like an education game, like it's trying to teach you Bitcoin, even though after you play this very, very, very fun game, you will understand how Bitcoin works. And trust me, it is fun. I have played it. I don't want to give too much away. So let's just get into our conversation with Scott and Tali. This is Rethinking Bitcoin Education and Self-Custody Parenting. Tali and Scott, welcome to Bitcoin Audible. How are you doing, guys?
I'm doing great, Guy.
Doing great.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, for sure. We're starting this as if we haven't been talking for like 20 minutes already.
You're right.
You have to officially start it for everybody else. Everybody's like, oh, this is the beginning of a conversation. Okay. Well, guys, thank you. As I said just a little bit ago, what really kind of struck me and wanted to have this conversation, because we've met like, I don't know, 3 or 4 times now over meetings in the last couple of weeks, and we've been talking about a bunch of other stuff in your game in particular, which I'm pretty stoked about. And I've shared that out a couple times, so I'm sure a lot of this audience kind of knows about HODL Up and a lot of things that are happening there, even though many won't, and we will definitely be covering that in just a minute. But I'm kind of getting into a place where I'm thinking about RAD's future education. And we are vehemently against public school. But that is basically the length. And, we have like a couple of little options. Like here's like a little forestry school that's great for young kids and these sorts of activities. And we know these things. And we also know that we need to be thinking differently about school. Like it's not put them in a desk and like go through a list of things. But it's also a hard problem, and it feels like one of those things where it's just an open field. Like I just have an unlimited number of options and I don't have a good filter for. And you guys have basically already been through this and have done all of this investigation. And so this is one of the big things that I wanted to get you on to actually just have a conversation about, which I would have just called you guys, but it makes way more sense to do this as a show because I know a lot of this audience is thinking about the exact same thing. And so just on that note, thank you guys seriously for taking the time and coming on and talking about this, because we're going to talk about Bitcoin education and then also just education in general for Bitcoiners. Not even just talking about Bitcoin, but how the hell do we educate people when we do not want them to fall into the fiat brain rot?
Yeah,
basically. Yeah. So thank you guys. That's my introduction to why I wanted to have this conversation.
This is our passion, and being able to share with others actually is very fulfilling for us. So selfishly, we're enjoying it because we're able to help others. So we're very grateful in return. So
yeah, absolutely, man. So I actually wanted to start because this is a great excuse for me to get to know you guys a little bit better, because our other conversations have just been kind of in context of what the project stuff we're talking about. Tali and Scott, why don't you give me your backgrounds? What did you guys originally do? What led you here? Why did you get into unschooling, homeschooling stuff? Like, y'all are way ahead of me on this, and I know a lot of people only started thinking about this like 3 or 4 years ago when COVID happened, and they were like, "Oh, maybe government schooling was a terrible idea." Why are you guys 20 years ahead of everybody?
Well, I don't know if we really are. When our kids were as young as Rad, it was really Tali. So we met in business school, and I'd been in the Army, and then decided I was going to be a management consultant. And Tali had come to be an investment banker, and we were following the fiat path. And I had gone to public schools. And this is really a better story from Tali's point of view. From my point of view, I was expecting that she would want to continue her career. We just invested a couple of years in our MBAs, and she basically said she took a look at our firstborn and had some feelings and said, I want to stay with her. And I think that's actually the best place to start the story.
Yeah. So when we were going through business school, I actually visited some preschools. Actually, let me back up. When I was pregnant with our first, I visited preschools, or actually, I guess they would be considered daycare because she would be a newborn. But my full intention was to take some time off when she was born and then go straight back to work. And we were going to have a nanny who lived with us, and all our kids were going to go to private school and go, I'm Chinese, so we're very Asian, and, they were going to go to the best schools, the best after school programs, and go to all the Ivy League, options and stuff like that. And so that was my original plan. And when our baby was born, I had a nanny lined up. I had a specific timeline that I set, and I was holding her. And I thought, if I hand her over to the nanny, I'm not going to see her. I'm going to leave the house before she's up. I'm going to come home after she goes to sleep, and I'll probably work weekends, and that she's going to grow up not knowing me. And I really just didn't want that. I don't want her raised by somebody else. I have a lot of ideas about parenting based on my own family background. And I remember every time when I was growing up, I experienced something that was really negative. I would think in my mind how differently I would handle the situation when I have my own family. And so I have all these ideas in my mind, and I was holding our firstborn. I was like, I just don't want her to be subject to other people who will love her less than we do. Because nobody will love her the way that we
you learn from who you spend your time with. And we've literally set up a situation where we don't spend the most time with our family. And it's a little crazy. It's funny.
Yeah. And so just kind of back up a little bit. When I was pregnant with her, I started visiting daycare. This is before I decided to hire a nanny. And I went to one that was really expensive. long wait lines or wait list. And I told them I wanted to spend 2 hours in the morning just observing. I didn't want them selling me their philosophy. I just wanted to spend time and see how things were done. And I remember sitting in their play area. Everything was sterile, right? You have to put the booties on your shoes. You go in, everybody's washing their hands 10 times. Everything was sterile. And I remember specifically sitting there watching this child in the middle of a beautiful room, and the worker was sitting next to the baby, not interacting because she didn't care. And this baby was just like literally just looking around the room in this beautiful place. And I wanted to cry. I'm like, I don't want my babies put in the beautiful room with nobody who cares about her interacting with her at all. So anyway, so that was when we decided that I would stay home. And then fast forward a couple of years, we have 2 more babies that just decided to show up.
Okay. So, I mean, let's let Guy know. We have,
showed up. I don't know.
we have, it's a tight shock.
There was a box on the deck, and I just
I was doing all the right things. And they just showed up.
So we have 4 kids, and they're just over 5 years apart from the first.
No, they're under 5 years apart.
Is it under?
Under.
Okay. Well, it's
from the first to the fifth.
To the fourth.
Fourth.
I mean, from the first to the fourth, there's only 5 years.
Less than 5 years.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, it was.
They did just show up.
Yeah, they just showed up. You don't know what happened. So so we found ourselves in the zone defense there. But the thing was we just made a decision. This is actually a pretty important thing, and I think you're already there. But it doesn't start with your capability to do it or your confidence to do it. It actually starts with your commitment to start. Mm-hmm. And when you say, I am committed to take this path, even though I don't know what's on this path, I'm making a decision to pursue what we keep calling self-custody of education. And really for this discussion, Tali corrected me, it's really self-custody of parenting. It's really what we're talking about. Because some people have to have dual incomes just to get by with inflation and whatnot. And we made a decision. Maybe we don't go on certain vacations. Maybe we don't have the certain car we want or the house in a certain area. But our commitment was it was going to be family first. And this is actually where I didn't have the words for it back then. But now after being in the Bitcoin space for a while and having studied Austrian economics and low time pressure, I feel we have better words to describe this. When you have a child, you care more than anyone else about that child. You're caring about their long-term success and happiness and their health. If you look at just a first principles basis, what is the school interested in? What is the state interested in? And it's not the kids' education. It's not. Yeah. It's and this is one of those things we can maybe get into later, but it's more about compliance and conformity. It's not about creativity. It's not about critical thinking. It is conformity and compliance. That's where it is. And then there's the money side of it. So if you're now tied to getting those federal funds because you have a kid, literally a butt in a seat, you don't really care about their education. You care about getting the money that comes with it. But that comes with whatever the state wants to do or the Fed wants to do that's tied with those dollars. And if you're a teacher, you're now evaluated on test scores. So are you teaching your kids how to use AI? Are you teaching your kids about Austrian economics? No, you're teaching the kids what's on that test. Whether they really need to know that or not in life. So you have, if you just back up from that, the incentives, you're getting exactly what the incentives are meant to do. But it all goes back to, you have to make a decision. If you're going to self-custody parenting, you're going to commit to this path, and you have a different low time preference view of what you're going to do. And that's going to change everything that you're going to decide to do. Versus if you trust the state or you trust the bureaucrats or you trust whoever, just understand what their incentives are. Their incentives are not in line with what our incentives are.
Well, I have to say there are people in the education system who really do care. It's just the system doesn't allow them the freedom to really do what they want to do. But if I just kind of step back into our personal experience and continue to share that, it was never my intention, even after I decided to stay home, that I would homeschool, because truth be told, I didn't know it was an option. I honestly did not know that homeschooling was an option.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It was really by chance. I think our oldest was 2. Then we had a 1-year-old and then a newborn. And we were over at a friend's. Yeah, it was crazy, guy. And then we moved like every time we had a baby too. So
Let's leave that out.
Yeah, let's leave that out. But anyway, so I'm over at a friend's house for play date. And her neighbor comes over with her. I think it was like a 9-year-old son or something. And so we were just kind of chit-chatting, and she goes, yeah, I taught my son, and she homeschooled. She had an only child, and she homeschooled a 9-year-old son. And she said, well, tell him how to read when he was a baby. And I'm looking at her like, what does that mean? Like, how do you even know that the baby is comprehending the words, which in their eyes are just squiggle lines? How do you know they understand? And she goes, no. I'm telling you, he could read when he was 10 months old. I'm like, get out of here. She goes, no, I'm going to show you a book. So she goes back to her house, comes back over with a book called How to Teach Your Baby to Read. So I take it home and I read it. And in the middle of the night, I'm like, oh my God, Scott, we're late. Our child is 2. Our oldest was 2. And I said, I'm going to miss the window, because the window for teaching a baby to read is 0 to 36 months old. She at the time was 30 months old.
Really?
And I thought, I'm already behind. What am I going to do tomorrow?
Guys thinking that right now.
Yeah, straight to Walmart. You got to buy those poster board and those big like markers, the 1-inch thick markers, and you got to start making these crazy flashcards that are like this big, because babies can't focus their eyesight yet. You have to make things very big. They're nearsighted. So 2-year-old, 1-year-old, and a newborn, and I start flashing cards in front of their faces. And I thought, oh my gosh, I gotta, this is unacceptable. I'm already behind schedule. And then she lends me another book called Mary Pride's Big Book on Homeschooling. This is back in the day when people didn't
you're
really
gonna have to send me this stuff, by the way. I just want you to know.
I don't think it's in print anymore, because that was like a phone book size. It was like their review of all the available homeschooling materials out there from K to 12th grade. She gives me the book, and I'm reading through the book cover to cover. Now, my firstborn was only 2, but I read all the way through the high school curriculum, everything. And I thought, I really think I can do this. I'm going to try it. She's 2. I'm already teaching her how to read. So that was when I kind of accidentally fell into it. And there was another person at church who said that she stayed home to homeschool her girls, but they were special needs. And so I'm like, oh, okay, that like to me makes sense. But do normal people, do they homeschool?
Do
and
normal
apparently,
people do this?
apparently there's a whole community. I'm like, what? But anyway, so then I started talking about homeschooling, and I get a lot of pushback from both sides of our family. Her parents at the time were working at a local high school. My family, they were like, are you crazy? Because, you just, first of all, why are you staying at home? Because you just got your MBA and you walked away from a career. Second of all, you're going to ruin them because they're going to have no social skills. So under the pressure, I thought, okay, fine, I will put them in preschool. At least they will be able to socialize with other children. So I did that for a year. It was very expensive. Again, I did a lot of research, and we were on the wait list, and then we got on the wait list, and it was like, yay, our kids are going to a really good situation. And there's another story about when I was touring the preschools, but I'm going to skip that. Just fast forward. So now so Brianna was 4 years old, Nolan was 3, and Alea is about to go into preschool. So I'm like, I put them, Brianna's been in it for 2 years. I'm like, maybe I should go and take a look at what I'm paying for, because I'm about to put my third one through. And that was when the light bulb came on for me, full brightness. I'm like, this is so stupid. So what I experienced was I send them to this very expensive preschool for socialization purpose, right? I go there, and the first thing they do when they get the kids out of their parents' car is to line them up. But there's no talking. Then they walk in a straight line, holding a string, right? They're all lined up. Everybody's got a hand on the string, and they're walking on the line that they put down tape in the hallway. So they're walking on the line, and they're making a blowfish, like no talking. So they're walking to their the room where they put their backpacks in the cubicles, no talking. Walk back out of that room on the line that's been marked on the floor. You go into their main room, and everybody gets a square of carpet. You sit on the carpet in your spot, no talking. And the whole day was no talking, be quiet, line up. And then when they went out to recess, I was watching. I'm like, they're like, out of the whole class, two or three kids played. And I could tell that they probably grew up in the same church. But any of the kids who didn't know each other, there was no socialization. There was nothing facilitated by the teachers. It was just like, ooh, playtime. And everybody's like in their own corners of the playground. And then that day, it was near Christmas, and they were making artwork. So I'm like, oh, that's cool. Artwork, yay. They get messy. No, they were set on their own carpet square and called up to the desk by the teacher one at a time. And the teacher would pick up the child, put the child in her lap, and hold the child's finger and put it on the ink pad, and then hold the finger over a piece of paper to make the perfect Christmas tree with your thumb print. And then they would bring the child, put the child down, call the next one over. And I'm thinking,
I have a headache.
Where's the socialization, number one? There's no creativity allowed whatsoever. The whole time it was line up, be quiet, do as you're told.
Yep.
And after that, I was like, that's
follow instructions. That's the only thing it teaches. I swear it's the only thing it teaches is to follow instructions. That's all it is.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And there are a couple books on that.
And that was the end of my trying to socialize them by the schools. I'm like, forget that. I'm taking them to the zoo, and they can socialize with your friends there.
Yeah, just to go to the end of to see the end of the movie, if you will. The way that turns out is that this whole idea of socialization is one of the biggest FUD things out there about homeschooling.
Yeah, I don't know where that came from exactly.
I don't know either. I was worried about it when Tali first said, "Hey, I want to stay home and do this." It's the opposite. Our kids are now done all with the high school, and they are able to talk to adults. They're able to talk to other kids. They're able to talk to coworkers. They are very adept at communication and talking with others.
And very confident.
They're very confident. And it's complete. You go back to the conformity and the compliance of what is this Prussian style of education that they're in. It goes back to, there's a couple of books that you might be interested. The John Taylor Gatto has Dumbing Us Down and Weapons of Mass Instruction, these type of things that tell you like the history of this.
Are these both John Taylor Gatto?
Yes.
Okay.
And you go back, and it makes for good military soldiers because they comply, and it makes for good industry workers because you go to a factory, the bell goes off, and you're at a certain spot. You do a certain thing. You go somewhere. So this is
exactly.
That goes back to what I was saying. What is it the school is intended to do? What are you educating for? And if you're trying to educate people to be in that environment, then you don't want people who have critical thinking and challenge you. You don't want them to be creative. You want them to follow certain things. So you're getting exactly what the system was designed for. And then again, this is all in hindsight. Now you look back and you say, homeschool, what are kids supposed to do? Kids are supposed to scrape their knees, run around, make mistakes, learn how to interact with others, be creative. It's so contrary to human nature. And I know we're going to go down other things. But
I remember talking to teachers who have come from an experience in public/private schools, and then came into the homeschool community to teach co-op classes or something, those a la carte classes. And I remember one of them saying, if she went into a public school class and said, everybody take out a piece of paper and draw your dream or a butterfly, even like something simple, draw a butterfly, nobody would move. They would look at her and say, well, what color should I use? What like parameters are there? She would say, draw a butterfly, and they would just be like silence, no movement. And then she goes into a homeschooling environment. She goes, draw a butterfly. Everybody's like furiously going crazy because nobody has told them what they're not supposed to be doing. They just like the creativity level is just night and day. And it's actually really sad when I hear stories like that.
No, it's crazy sad. Because it really teaches, it's amazing how much it preconditions us to believe there is only one way to think. Like even in the absence of an explicit answer, the structure of it is designed such that there's only one way to do anything, and you only get the check mark, and you only get the number, the right number that's the good number as opposed to the bad number, if you do it in exactly that way. That somehow life is a series of like true false question and answer, and if you literally just, you're either right or you're wrong, and like nothing in life is like that. There's literally nothing in life actually has a set of instructions. You know, there's no way to do a business. Like that's one of the craziest things that people like, you know, it's like, well, how do you run a business? It's like, okay, well, there's a lot of practices that help make a business good and like put you in the frame of like a productive person, but there's no instruction booklet for it. In fact, everything that's ever a successful business is literally successful in the environment because it does something that everybody else didn't do. You know, it is genuinely creativity and innovation that makes the whole concept even work. And
there's there's another sort of byproduct of going through a school system, which is that children are taught that they have to be correct even in the learning phase. So they're punished for mistakes. So if they give you a lecture on a new concept and say, go home and do your homework, and they grade your homework, and that grade is going into the teacher's grade book, now you're fearing mistakes because the consequence is you get not an A or something like that. And I actually read an article written, I think it was by one of the Harvard professors a long time ago, and it was contrasting the American way of teaching math and the Japanese way of teaching math. So the American way is you get a lecture, you do your homework, and the paper, your homework is handed out, right? And you have a grade on the top that's circled. You know, if you get an A or A plus or B or D, or you fail, people kind of generally know where you are, and you kind of hide it. If you have anything less than an A, you kind of turn your paper over while you're waiting for the teachers to go around. Whereas in Japan, they celebrate the learning process and the mistake making. And so when they call a kid to the front of the board and they try to work out a problem, the teacher doesn't say immediately, for efficiency's sake, here's how you do it. They let the child experiment, fail, and everybody's learning with him. And so when he finally gets it, people clap for him. So that there's I wouldn't say there's no fear, but there's less fear in making a mistake in the learning process. And making mistakes is so important while you're learning.
There is natural fear, but there's not imposed fear. There's not unnecessary fear. And in fact, like they've built the environment to absolve the natural fear, to get around that natural tendency to not want to make a mistake or not want to explore something because it is an unknown area. And that's the whole point of the environment, right? The whole point of education is to make it so that we're not afraid to try new things. We're not afraid to make mistakes, because if we are, we're stagnant. There is no such thing as progress without that. And the fact that we have taught that, we've made people more afraid than they even naturally would be. I cannot tell you how many times like people think that like after they're out of high school or college, it's just like, well, I'm just done learning, or I'm just done reading. Like I've finished it now. I'm educated. And it's like education has failed you if you think that's what it means to be done with school, you know, just so crazy. Like it should teach us, we should be learning how to learn, because learning doesn't end. Like if you think you learned everything and you're educated, you're broken. You're the opposite of educated. You're the opposite of prepared for the world. You're just a box that somebody stamped a number on. You know, it's funny, Tali, your experience with your child or whatever, when you were like, somebody else is going to raise this, is literally the exact same thing that happened to my wife. She was her mom was a stay-at-home mom as well. And she found it funny that, or she kind of hates it now looking back on it, that she kind of like looked down on that when she was younger, you know, like the public schooling system, and just kind of like the normal conception of that was just kind of like, oh, she could go off and do a career. She could do this, but instead she's a stay-at-home mom. You know, she's subject to the life or whatever. And, you know, she was working in legal. My wife was working in legal, and not really doing something that she liked, but something she was good at. She's really good at organizing and being systematic about stuff. It's the thing that I'm not good at. But after we had Rad, she was just like, she was getting like 3 months maternity leave. The person she was looking for was really great. And we loved her and didn't want to break that relationship at all. But she was just like, I don't understand how, like, why is this thing that I'm going off and doing for somebody else more important?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Like, in what possible way could I judge that as more important than like being there and guiding Rad to learn the way he should be learning, and actually being there? And she had like a 180-degree turn and just like looked at her mom as like, holy crap, I'm so glad she did this instead of doing what everybody else was doing. And then she never went back. She was just like, I don't think I can. Can we manage this? And I was like,
exactly.
I mean, I certainly want you to be Rad to be with you all day, as opposed to like, you know, a nanny or a preschool or something like that. You know, we just have kind of gone down that direction more and more since then. And we just realized how much problem there is and how little control and the negative consequences of just constantly shipping your kid off to somebody else who is trying to create a statistic, you know, trying to make sure that they can get the score or get the money or get the system that's not going to, like, just like you said, a sanitized, like, I don't want that. Like, I want my kid to, you know, accidentally eat dirt from time to time.
Well, I mean, there's so many layers.
There's
so many layers to this guy. I mean, I love that Bitcoiners naturally gravitate towards this, to parenting and families. The number of Bitcoiners that are starting families and want to have large families is just awesome. But there's multiple layers. One is there's something to making mistakes and all that other part of the conversation we were talking about, where it really comes down to anti-fragility, right? You're going to be able to teach yourself. You're going to be able to recover from mistakes. There's also when the teacher is the one that tells you if you were right or wrong, you're not just teaching that subject. You're teaching that little mind that you can't do it yourself. You need a higher authority to tell you what you want. Right. So this is kind of getting down the communist manifesto type of thing. Yeah. If you are a statist and you want to have control, you want people who feel fragile, who bow down to authority figures, and you want to separate the kids from church. You want to separate them from family. You want to separate them from any other place where they could have a different point of view. Because then they're more vulnerable and they're more likely to say, yes, I should pay attention to this authority. So there's just layers of issues. It's more than just that one subject or that one piece of paper or whatever it is. There are layers to what we're talking about, and they build on each other. Yes, you should be celebrating. You don't want to say, hey, go out and make mistakes, as in it's good that you failed, but it's good that you learn how to learn, all that. That is a huge skill that you could give your child for success in life.
Right. To add on top of that as well, if you just think about learning in and of itself, the established system, whether it's public or private, they put the reward system external of the person. And so, for example, if you do something well, you almost get to the point where you just need that external, like either a grade or a teacher saying, well done or something.
It's about validation. It's about validation from someone else rather than internal understanding. Yeah.
Right. So, for example, something as simple as the reading program, they want to incentivize kids to read. The number of books you read gets a certain checkpoint or something. And when you get a certain number of checks, then they give you some kind of little trinket or something, right? So, or a sticker or something, anything that they do to keep track of your progress on the board or with toys, that's basically saying the reading experience itself has zero reward.
Mm-hmm.
You're doing it for the trinket. You're doing it for the sticker. But the truth is, why do we read? Why you read? Why does Scott read? We read because there's joy in gaining knowledge. There's joy in being immersed in a story. And so when our kids were growing up, I was really mindful of never changing that reward system from the experience itself into something external that I can give them. So I never bribed them to do something. It was, you're doing it because this is what you're supposed to do. I have a job. Dad has a job. You guys have a job. But then beyond that, there's so much joy in reading a wonderful story that I don't need to give them a sticker because that takes away from the value of the experience, you know?
I think it leads to people thinking that success is external validation, and they make a false equivalency. I think this is why we have such a culture. Like every time I just want to pull my hair out every time I hear somebody say, I want to be famous. And I'm like, so your goal isn't to actually be good at something or to know something or to succeed massively. It's to make it, it's for everyone else to believe you succeeded because you think that is success. You just want a lot of people looking in your direction, but you don't have any concept as to why or what you're going to do. That's why a whole bunch of people who have no interest in the concept of acting, which is a fascinating thing to try to embody someone else's mindset and, you know, to pretend in like a really full sense and then to tell that story. That is a fascinating thing. And I love the idea of acting, but I don't want to be an actor because there's a degree of fame that just sounds awful, you know? But most people, like so many people, I think strive for that specifically because they just think the reflection of everyone else thinking they have succeeded is success. And I also think it's why like 90% of people in Hollywood are messed up in the head. They have like, they're just bad people and they feel empty because what they're going after is meaningless. They don't even know what it is that they want. They just want that external validation. And it's great for the moment that they receive an award or they get a lot of pat on the back and then they go home and they think, why am I doing any of this? Why does any of this matter? Because out of that, it's like getting drunk. You know, it's really fun when you're drunk, but then you're hungover the next day and you realize that you just wasted a whole day drinking and there was nothing meaningful about it. You had nothing. You're just striving for external validation rather than something that is meaningful and lasting to you. And I feel like public schools like really, they teach that. They try to embed it. And another point to something you talked about in conformity is conformity, I think, is like kind of a natural result of trying to scale. You know, the fact that it has to be so big, they have to conform in order to just measure whether or not they have progress, because it necessarily has to be quantitative and it can't be qualitative when everything about learning in life is qualitative. You know, like if they're trying to put a number on it, it has to be quantitative. And if you're trying to compare New York to North Carolina to California, you have to have some sort of a quantitative measure. You can't just be like, New York, what's your general abstract assessment? Qualitative must scale small, you know, it like must start small and then bridge out in complexity. But if you're having like some giant, massive system and you're trying to figure out where funding goes, you have to be a statistic. There has to be some way to make it a statistic, which means quality is gone by necessity. Everybody has to take the same test. Everybody has to be in the same program. Everybody has to sit in the same square and line up in the same line and do the same instructions. And conformity is a necessity for the thing to even work in the way it's supposed to. And by doing so, it has to literally absolve itself of its fundamental purpose to actually create it. It's just a mess conceptually.
So, Guy, you can hear another perspective. There's so many analogies, but another thing you can apply from the Bitcoin world is comparing the centralized, I'm going to control everything view compared to decentralized up. What you just described, if you were in charge of that 1,000-kid school or whatever, you're grouping the kids, and the way they usually do it is by age and level. So you're sixth grade, medium, whatever. I don't even know what the levels are now. If you
Sixth
really
grade
look at
medium.
it, yeah, you're whatever. You're in the dance placement something. But if you really think about it, first of all, kids want to study different things, and it's okay
Mm-hmm.
that they're interested in different things. So you start with what is the curriculum that you're teaching. Then you get into expecting certain people to be at that level in that age. So one of the things that Tali did is she just taught the kids. So if the youngest one happened to be in the room when she was teaching the others, there was no, oh, you're not ready for this because you're not the right,
Mm-hmm.
you're
in the wrong class.
You're in the wrong class. And guess what? If a student has a passion for something and they're really good at it, like I think Albert Einstein was homeschooled. I mean, if you have a passion for something and you say, I'm sorry, guy, we're going to hold you back because for your age, you really should be here. In fact, we're going to team you up with the worst kid in class because you're going to go help them because we're trying to get everybody to this medium average in the class. So one of the benefits when you take control of the education is if a student has special needs and they need help, that's fine. They get it. If you're exceptional, let the kid run.
If they have the motivation, let them chase whatever they want to chase. Yeah. Imagine trying to fight that. Like
you are. So you say, well, you can't be around other people different ages. You have to be in this class and then you have to go to this class for this subject at this time. And you're breaking up the learning pattern. The whole time management of the day is a whole other subject. And then how you're breaking up the pattern, you're forcing them by age. And then in terms of time management, you're forcing them into the season too, where you're going to take off the summer. So another thing that Tali did is homeschoolers don't know that there's a summer break. They don't know. And you have
some do.
All right. Yeah. So you have, but in the natural summer, what's going to happen when you imagine you don't go to the gym for a while? You're gonna get soft, and then you're going to try to go back to the gym, and now you have to recover. So academically, you're going to spend the first part of the year trying to recap where you were before. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you are just consistent year round, and you're always building, and you're not falling back for a couple months and then trying to catch up, there are so many things that you don't think about in the structure of what we call normal schooling that are not allowing the best information, the best learning experience for our kids. There are so many examples: the time management piece, the age conformity piece, the subject conformity piece. There are just so many things with that. Whereas if you go bottoms up and you go with the family unit and you talk about individual kids and what they need, and you build up from there what they're doing, they're going to be fine. In fact, I would argue they're going to be much, much better off with that bottoms-up approach than everybody top-down, fit into your little thing.
Something else I want to add is also there's been a lot of studies on the influence of the kids' performance by the perception of the teacher. So in that book by Caldani called Influence, there's anyway, so he cites several studies where
the book is called Influence.
Maybe 1,000 books.
I'll send you send you the name.
Send me the link.
Basically, the studies that they conducted where they told groups of teachers that these kids coming into your class are exceptional. They're gifted kids, and then they were given a task that they had to perform with the kids and teach them something, and then measure their success. And then another group of kids came through and they're like, oh, these are underperforming kids. They're underprivileged and they're poor students. And then same task, same measurement standard. And then another one that came through that was the what's it called? The standardized one where they told them nothing about the kids, right? And so But actually, these kids are all randomly selected. There was nobody who was gifted. There was nobody who was underperforming. They were just randomly selected kids put into 3 groups, and the teachers taught the same thing. And every single time, what they found was that the kids that were told, that the teachers were told were gifted, reflected gifted results. Every single time, because they reflect the expectations.
I believe that's so easy. Yes.
Okay, so then I'm going to back up to another book. It's called The Outliers, and I forget the name. The author you have
Malcolm Gladwell.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
He talks about how
love that book.
How in the same grade, right, you have a 1 year span of the kids' birthdays. So you have people who come in who are, they could be same class, 1 year older. And when the kids are young, 1 year is huge in their ability to interpret, to comprehend, etc. And so it's easier for them to do better in most cases than the kid that is 1 year younger. But then they start the expectation early. If they come in kindergarten and one is 5 and one is 5 and almost 6 and one just turned 5, well, the people who do well now have that expectation and reputation with the teachers. They're going to keep going and they keep building on that advantage versus somebody who's very young coming in, crying about the mom leaving the parents, and just emotionally not coping. The only difference is the maturity level, because that's biological. But the interpretation by the teacher and the perception and the expectation carries on for the next 12 years.
And that label. And then
if you combine that with the studies done in that book called Influence, what do we get?
Yeah. It's the fact that the tyranny of low expectations works in both directions, right? Is that if someone keeps telling you that you're broken, you're not very smart, it's okay, you're not a gifted student, well, then you are literally going to internalize that and you're going to produce those results.
Yes.
And every time you run into a challenge, you're going to think, well, I'm not gifted, so I can't face this. I'm not going to be able to get through this.
Huge. That's huge.
What you believe about yourself is such a huge, important thing. And then in addition, what someone else believes about what somebody else expects of you. There's a really fantastic study kind of in that same concept, but just about like trust is somebody went through and they would hand randomly, like essentially trust a stranger on like a subway or just in a public space or whatever. And they would like hand them a wad of cash and they would just be like, hey, can you hold this for a second? And get them to literally like stand there and just like hold it and then ask them to watch after something or, look after something valuable or whatnot. And the people would do it. And they would be like, odd. Somebody just trusted them to do this, but like across the board, everybody trusted them. And it was, or everybody like performed the task. They didn't run off with it, which was crazy. But it's like one of those things that if you trust someone else, they are more likely to trust you and to help you. If you distrust somebody else, like if you go into a situation, one that I always use, if you go into a mechanic and you're just like, listen, don't screw me here. Like if I don't need my rotors changed, I'm going to double check it. They're immediately going to want to screw you. And you are going to create that world for yourself because everybody is going to try to rip you off because they just don't like that you don't trust them. And then vice versa. If you go in trusting them, they're going to just want to do nice to you. They're going to want to be good to you. They're going to want to return that trust. Same thing goes for expectations. Same thing goes for education. Tali, one of the things you mentioned earlier was that a lot of people care, but the institutions, the system itself doesn't let them actually produce good results because they're so chained to how they have to do it. And this is something, my mom was a teacher and because of that, I grew up around teachers. Like all of my family, quote unquote extended friends and family, people that I'd spent a lot of time with would just be teachers in other classes. I spent time in my mom's high school, more time in high school before I got to high school than I did during high school. Like I was just there with other teachers. I cannot tell you, looking back, and I started to see it through high school too already, but looking back, I cannot believe how much care and intelligence was squandered. Like good teachers, bad teachers who were propped up, awful teachers who did not care, who were constantly rewarded and could not be fixed. You couldn't get rid of them. And then excellent teachers who were trapped into stupid situations and to teach something that they didn't even think was useful, like in just a way that they just did not have the ability to experiment, to adapt, to work with the kids, and how many would try still? But then you'd have to stop it. I mean, I had some great teachers who were brilliant in that way. But then we would constantly have to be like, well, we have to go back because we're going to have a test and we have to do it this way. And it's just value and care squandered at an unbelievable level.
Well, it does. It's not just the creativity you're taking away from students. You're taking the creativity away from someone. If your gift in this world is teaching and you love and have a passion and that's what you want to do, but you go into a system and you say, you will give a lecture and you will use these textbooks and you will have 45-minute or an hour period and then it will break and you're also destroying the creativity of the teachers. We can get into game schooling and there's a lot of other ways of learning things. Mm-hmm. If you go out and experience something like a life skill of making a grocery list because you're going to make dinner that night. So just take a real world example for a kid. You're responsible for dinner tonight. What do we need to buy? Go to the store, buy it, pay for it. That is a very different experience than sitting in, you're going to sit in the seat and hear a little example. But if you're a teacher, you're not given a lot of leeway in your creativity on how you reach the students.
This episode is brought to you by the Cold Card hardware wallet. Not only can you get the Cold Card Mark IV, which is one of my favorites. In fact, I still have this one here. This is the one, by the way, that if you have been paying attention to these ads, you should have 6 of the 12 seed words that I set this one up with. These keys are not very secure, and you may very well be getting 150,000 sats if you're paying attention. But I've always loved the Cold Card, and the Mark IV specifically has the NFC, which my ability to use tap to pay in my wallet on my phone is just one of the coolest ways to interact with this, and I have loved it. And the Cold Card Q now has a full QWERTY keyboard. It is basically like a BlackBerry device. It has a large screen so that you can scan with QR on top of being able to use NFC and USB if you would like, or to fundamentally break those connections in the hardware so that you know those are not accessible. The simple fact of the matter is the Cold Card is how you keep your Bitcoin safe. Check out the numerous security devices at coinkite.com, the link, the details, and the discount code will be right down in the show notes. And if you came here hoping to get your 150,000 sats, the second word is town, the 7th word is merit, and the 11th word is resist. If you want to punch these into your Cold Card, you can buy one at the link below. So I want to get back to, well, actually, I want to lead this into Bitcoin very soon, in just a minute. Okay. But one thing that I want to hit on before we go there is, so what did you find in concrete? Did you find a quote unquote curriculum? Or was it just kind of like a constant state of exploration, and something that worked 3 years ago might just be something new, and this is kind of a process of finding a community and kind of a direction rather than finding some explicit thing? Or do you have something kind of concrete curriculum-esque to share, or that you think is like a big part of this for, let's say, me and Rad?
Let's do he said, she said, because I have some stuff to add to that. I think
I'm going to say yes to all of the above. So when we first started, because I didn't know what to go on, I did do a lot of research. I did rely on some curriculum, but I don't recommend that for you because your son is only 2. There's just no reason to find any curriculum whatsoever. I would say the very best thing I can recommend for people with young kids is just to incorporate as much of your life with them as possible. So, of course, we want to be reading to them at bedtime. Of course, we want to teach them the ABCs. But, when we go to the grocery store, something that really bugs me when I go is when I see kids go and they're placed in a shopping cart, and then they're holding an iPad and they have no idea what is going on around them because they're being entertained. They're watching a video, they're playing a video game, doesn't matter what they're doing. They're there, but they're not really there. And something very, very easy for you to do is just to take them into the grocery store and plan the experiences for both of you. So when you're picking out apples, have the child stand up in the cart and pick out the apples for you, and then you can count the 1, too. And now you're teaching them numbers and they feel involved and they have that beautiful interaction, parent-child interaction. You can say, this is red, pick up a one red apple, pick up a green apple. You can say this is $1 and this is $2. And you can do some very basic math. And if you go down the aisle where you get the cereal boxes, you have them pick out the cereal box. Which size do you think we should do? How much is it? Read the little thingamajig, for the price and stuff like that. Is it on sale? Does it have the sale? They will learn the word sale very quickly, right? That kind of stuff. It's very easy, but they're not separate from what you're doing. If you're in the kitchen, that takes a little more careful planning because you have the hot stove oven, etc. But kids are so able to be a part of our lives. And right now, I feel like as a society, we keep them apart because we assume that it would be troublesome to incorporate them. So, but another thing I would say definitely is just start playing audio books. You do Bitcoin Audible, so it's kind of right now.
Yeah.
Just play storybooks for them. There are lots of options you can find, whether it's online or from the library. And some of them have some music in the background. Doesn't matter, but it's like spoken language is so important. And for some reason, when they hear good language, they can read good language and they can write good language. And so if they're watching cartoon and the cartoon is like Word World, for example, we loved Word World. I don't know if you guys watch that.
Don't know that one.
It's on PBS, and they make animals in the shape of the letters that spell the animal. So sheep would be created with SHEEP. It's actually super fun, and they put the letters together. But those programs have very short words because they were created for preschoolers. What you want to do is you want to play classical literature and not the dumbed down stuff, and just let them hear it all the time because they are not otherwise going to hear it anywhere else, not from the shows, not from the movies, not anywhere, but it just builds sort of in the background. So those are the two things I would recommend is play with them, incorporate them in your life, and just play beautiful literature spoken in the background all the time.
Before we, Paul, Scott, I want you to hold that in your head. Re-reference what you're about to say so you don't lose it. Okay. One thing I wanted to say is that like the grocery store thing, I think is a perfect example. And like Rad loves to push the cart, and I'll just like give him instructions to like, well, bring the cart back over here, and he does a fantastic job if you just let him make the mistakes and do it wrong for a little while. And then boom, he picks it up like so fast. But I think a lot of it is that, I think you're right. I think one of the most beneficial things that you can do is just incorporate them in everything that you're doing. And I think a lot of the pressure and why we don't do that is because nobody has any time, is because inflation has robbed us of all of our leisure. And it means that the cost of that is taking twice as long to do anything because you're having to incorporate somebody who is learning it. And we are so focused on just get it done. Here's an iPad so that you're watching something and you're not in my way. And we're so rushed to get to the next thing because our extra has been constantly stolen from us. And where we're supposed to get 5% more time every year, we're losing 2% because we need to be encouraged or incentivized to go out and do more. We're creating an economy of busy work that's robbing us of all of our meaningful lifetime to do exactly those sorts of things, like incorporating our kids into doing the dishes rather than just being like, please just go watch this stupid show so that I can get the dishes done and we can go to sleep,
Yeah.
But anyway, Scott, to you.
Well, there's a couple thoughts there for the inflation piece. If you go back, I forget the exact statistics, but if you look at the increase in number of students from 2000 to 2019 or 20, I haven't looked at these recently. It was like a 7% increase in students and an 8% increase in teachers. I might be a little bit off, but there was an 88% increase in administrators. And you think about where is that money going as the cost goes up? And you compare that, and this is normal in the Bitcoin spaces, where it's normal to say technology is deflationary. Okay. Price of education should be coming down. The quality should be going up. There's more information and more languages available than ever before. Completely. What a great example of how those two, the fiat system and technology, are the whole price of tomorrow thing. But coming back to a curriculum, this is one of those things where teachers don't have the opportunity to be creative, but if you as a parent, you have infinite. You have a blank canvas, and I think it was a John Flanagan books. Is that the one with the Ranger Apprentice you did? Mm-hmm. So Tali, it wasn't just classic literature.
John Flanagan.
Our kids were in the minivan, all strapped in like they're astronauts with their 28-point harness things on, and they couldn't go anywhere. And Tali would go to the library. She got a card for everybody in the family, so she has 6 cards. They're always maxed out, and we have multiple library fees for everything she's taking out. This was before streaming, so we had CDs or maybe even audio cassettes at that time. And she would just play these stories, and some of them would be 12 hours, 14 hours long. And John Flanagan was one of their favorites. And it doesn't have to be classical in the sense of like literally what an English teacher might call classic.
Right, yeah.
But the kids would hear vocabulary. They would hear different voices. They would hear, and they're just sponges. Mm-hmm. And so they're already in the car. So here you are, even if both parents are working, when you're taking a trip to the grocery store, when you are going to a sporting event, dropping them off at school, there are so many opportunities to leverage technology in creative ways. And all of our kids, they love reading. They love reading. They're not afraid to go and pick up a book on their own. And it wasn't because we were there saying you have to have a book. Now we had books stacked floor to ceiling around the whole. It just that was what we did anyway. But they just heard this. They were constantly hearing these different things, and is that an English curriculum? No. Is it a science curriculum? It's not really a curriculum, but it was an experience, and it's the way the kids were learning. They were learning by observing their environment, and then when you got to the grocery store, let them push the cart, and if they knock over something at the end of the aisle, guess what? You learned how to push a cart.
Right. That's what he was saying.
Right. You're gonna, the worst that happened is you have to buy something because your son has like completely like taken something out.
Well, also there's something else that we used to do when the kids were very little, like Rat's age. I used to take out Mother Goose or other types of just poems that with words that rhyme, because rhyming words are really fun. And I would limit the poems to either 4 to 5 lines, or if it's very long, I would cut them into pieces, and I would copy the lines onto little note cards. And when we start driving, I would just have them repeat after me. And we memorized so many poems. We had so much fun because a lot of the poems are, when you rhyme, it's just fun anyway. Fun, and it would, and they memorized it because I did it with them, and I memorized it with them, and we used to sing the poems just for fun. It was just, everybody was having a fabulous time. And then the stories, I mean, we would go into the car and they would reach over my shoulder to push the play button because they want to know what's happening next. And I think one of the saddest trend, I think, in education in America is we dumb everything down to grade levels. And so you have these beautifully written stories by good writers, and then you dumb them down to, okay, this is a 3rd grade reading level, so take out all these words because the kids can't understand them. And then you start to water down all of these beautiful expressions into simple 5-word sentences, and it's just really sad.
You should challenge, not try to meet them where they are. The whole point is to be, there's what was it called? What book was this? Damn, I don't remember what book it was. I don't know, something I've read recently, probably in the last year or so, that was just talking about where that perfect point of learning is, and where you achieve flow, so to speak, as well, is where there is enough to keep you engaged that but then there is enough that you don't know and you don't understand, that you are still constantly asking questions and trying to figure out at every single point. Like it's the perfect amount of, you're familiar with it and it's challenging and you don't know what it is, that it's keeping you in that middle space and dragging, it's pulling you forward constantly.
That's a video game psychology, right? You got to make it hard enough, but not too hard.
If you make it too hard, then they leave because they're like, I give up. And if it's too easy, then there's no dopamine hit when you achieve something. You get that happy Cinderella medium where I get the occasional dopamine hit because I got the whatever sword. I
just want to say that works for older older kids, you have to be mindful of that. But when your son is 2, he has zero. Everything is new. He doesn't know anything, right?
Yeah, he's just a sponge for whatever you put in it. Yeah.
I remember reading an article when our kids were your kids' age, and it was written by a Taiwanese professor. It was written in Chinese, and I just remember him saying, "It is better for you to expose your child to 1,000 new vocabulary words, and he only remembers or recognizes 10, than to show him only the 10, and he remembers and recognizes the 10, because the 990 words will come up again, and they're going to sit in the back of his mind, and he's going to have this rich experience and a treasury
of revelation when he realizes what word 11 is.
Because Brad doesn't know what is not possible for him. Everything is possible. Anything that we're saying right now about being hard or too easy or whatever, he has no concept. Everything is possible. So just expose him to anything and everything.
Yeah. Yeah, if I could go back to your curriculum question, though, because this was something I was stuck in, too, where a lot of people early on are thinking, how do I teach math? How do I teach the science? How do I teach writing? And I get that. You can go to, even if you can't attend a homeschooling conference, go to a homeschooling website and look at all the vendors that were attending there. There is so much material out there on every subject that you can imagine, literally. Maybe not Bitcoin, because that's something we're working on with the games and stuff, but there is a lot out there with these, and you can do that. But what I think is missing, and this is something that Tali and I have because everybody has to have a podcast, right? So we have our own podcast called Bitcoin Homeschoolers. And one of the things that we're doing is we're collecting these lessons learned as we talk to people, and eventually kind of put this out in public. We're going to publish what these lessons are, and this would include what a good curriculum should. What does a modern curriculum look like? I have a lot of thoughts on this. We won't go all the way down. I've already mentioned some. I believe teaching anti-fragility, learning how to learn, your mental framework, that is huge. Critical thinking. Obviously, teaching Austrian economics and money history. You don't have to be an accountant or anything else. Everybody should know the fundamentals, and they don't have to be complicated with math and things. Time preference, for example, teaching them this framework on what time preference is. Imagine that throughout your life, you're going to make all these decisions. And if every one of those decisions, you could be just 5%, 10% better than if you didn't have that framework. Maybe it's drinking alcohol, not drinking alcohol. Maybe it's going to bed, getting more sleep, and instead of trying to stay up all night. Maybe it's who you're dating. I mean, there are so many things. Certainly what you're going to do with your money. I believe time preference is a subject, and it's not a subject that just ends. It's something you incorporate over a long period of time. You can start with a marshmallow test or the cookie test. I'm sure you've seen the videos on that.
Yeah.
It's linked to future success.
Did y'all specifically do that out of curiosity? I mean, outside of in an abstract sense.
I don't know if we ever did the marshmallow test, but we did a lot of work. Like, we had the kids read a lot of biographies, and we talked about the lessons learned. We did specific classes on etiquette. We did specific classes on integrity. Cool. Learning how to learn is a big subject, because I think people assume that kids just know how to learn, but the truth is that's a skill set.
Yeah.
Another thing, when I was mentioning the memorizing of the poems, the muscle for memory is a practice skill as well. And so when they're young, of course, they're sponges, but as they get older, you really do need to exercise the muscle to memorize things, because in most professions, it will be very helpful for you to be able to draw information out of your mind quickly. And so memorization is a skill. Yeah, that one. That one. So, for example, that one guy, there's a book, Quick, what's his name? Jim Quick has a book. He was labeled as a kid with a bad brain early, and then he later on could memorize everybody's name in a room and do speed reading and things, and talk about memory palaces and things like that. Right. And having kids exposed to, I don't know what you would call those, learning hacks.
Yeah. Have you ever read Moonwalking with Einstein?
Yes.
Oh, that's a great one on memory, and the fact that memory is literally a skill. It is not.
It is.
And you can teach anybody who thinks they have a bad memory how to memorize 100 characters of of a random number even.
Right.
And one of the stories they used or explanations they used that I thought was really fascinating, just be like your natural memory is actually fantastic. It's about how you organize and think about it in your brain. And you said one of the great examples is that you can give like somebody would do this in like a lecture hall or whatever. They had like a big group of a ton of people and they were all watching. It's like, do you think I could give you a list of like 1,000 random images and then you could remember them in order afterward? Everybody was like, no, of course not. That's ridiculous. How could I possibly do that? But then he specifically went through and showed them 1,000 images, and then he could re-show them images after. Now, nobody would remember them in order or remember the specific image or be able to recall them, but he could show them images and say, was this in the group?
Mm-hmm.
And they would, like, almost across the board, they'd be like, that one wasn't in the group. That one was in the group. I do recognize that one. They would have familiarity with every image that was in that 1,000 image set, and they would know which ones weren't in it. He says, so you did remember it. You just don't know how to specifically recall it. You don't know what it is in your brain that is functioning to cement that memory. If you knew how to utilize it, you could, and everybody could. You just have to train it like a muscle. I thought that was fascinating. I'm not even done with the book yet. It's one of the 5 that I'm in the process of listening to at the same time.
That's a good example, though, of how you can be creative with the curriculum. Because if you go to Rad and say, you're going to have some time with Dad, and we're going to play a game. And you just tell them we're going to do the Memory Palace game with things in the room. They're just sponges. They will absorb that, and then later on, they'll apply it to situations you never remember. would never even have thought of.
Yeah.
So learning how to learn, those learning hacks would be a type of class. It's not like you have math, you have different levels. Imagine you have this critical thinking thing where every year you're going to expand on it. That skill set that your son would have, they'll blow you away with what they're able to do. And there's no reason you can't play the Memory Palace game with a 2-year-old. It might be really simple. Maybe it's some cards right now or something, but you could advance that. I think you can do a lot with artificial intelligence, as opposed to saying, oh no, everybody's just going to use it to cheat on their essay. I think Preston mentioned this on one of his podcasts. He was working with his son on a home project to make an automatic dog feeder or something. I might have it a little bit wrong. And they were using that to, hey, ChatGPT, what's the right kind of thing here? And then you would tell them what to go look for and what kind of board do I need to do this kind of thing. And so that's just a project with Dad. That's just a project there. But you're now teaching them, hey, this is just a tool that's out there. I'm not afraid of it, and I'm going to go figure out how I can apply it. So you're not going to stop AI. You're not going to stop where we're going with that. And if you tell your kids it's bad, people use it to cheat, and I don't know, whatever FUD is associated with it, you're preventing them from learning a tool that can make them either with their own business or contributing in another organization. So when it comes to going back to curriculum, think about the things that you think are valuable, and then when they hit you, whatever it is, it's okay to share that with them at the time. So if you're into storytelling and you want to make a film, guess what? Come on, come help me edit. Come help me do a video. Come help me do whatever in terms of being creative. And that's the equivalent of an art class, except it's, something different.
I also want to go back and address what you mentioned about trying curriculums out. So we have 4 kids and they learn differently and at different pace. So I'll use math as an example. There's a whole spectrum of methodology in teaching math. You have the root memory, like the very Asian, I'll beat it into you kind of thing, all the way to I'm not really teaching math. I'm kind of sneaking math in. So I actually picked out different curriculum along the spectrum. So we did the Singapore math and the Saxon math, which is on the one side of it. And then the other side of it is something called Life of Fred. I don't know if you've heard of it, but Life of Fred is a series of math storybooks, and it goes all the way up to calculus, and they only teach math in story form.
Oh,
And
whoa.
some people respond well to that. Some people don't respond well to that. But you really don't know with your specific child that you're trying to teach to how they will respond. But if you know that there is a spectrum of different ways to do it, then you can try different things. So another one more towards the spectrum of narrative, experiential kind of thing is called visual math. Now, visual math is a course that is actually college level, but I started using it to teach the kids when they're in elementary school because age doesn't matter really. This guy literally just uses marbles, and he would put like different boxes for the different digit. You know, you have the units, digit, tens, hundreds, thousands, and things like that. And he just plays with marbles, and it makes math so easy for someone who's visual.
Yeah.
So just knowing that there's a spectrum of different things you can try, and know that not every one method works with everybody.
Yeah.
So we did do a lot of trial and error.
You could also do games. So when I go to a game conference, I go to a game conference every year, and I will search out games that are educational. So you can get games on chemistry, you can get games on nature, you can get games on math, you can get games on, of course, we're interested in Austrian economics and Bitcoin, but you could have a family game night. And there's a lot of benefit to people, the tactile learning there. But there's also, even if the game itself, like take Go, for example, you can have a game where they're thinking critically. They're trying to solve a puzzle. And even though that's not a curriculum by itself, it's yet another way that you're helping your kids learn. And that particular subject, obviously, that's a passion of mine. But you can get really creative, and I guarantee anything you're interested in, someone has probably made a game out of it somewhere. And even if you don't, just the idea of strategy, understanding entropy in the games that have luck. But if it's a chess game, there's zero entropy, right? But you can have all kinds of learnings with games as well, and that's also different than watching a screen, right? So think about the environment what environment you have control of the environment in your house. Even when even if your kid is in public school, you take self-custody of your parenting, you control that. You can have a family game night. You can do projects together. You can listen to Audible in the car. You can do all of these things. And I think we're too tied to this. We have to, the quote unquote experts
supposed to be a one size fits all thing.
Yeah, you're supposed to. These are the subjects you're supposed to know. You're supposed to take this subject. You're supposed to.
They're
take
supposed to be categorized into their thing. If it's chemistry, it's supposed to be chemistry. If it's biology, it's supposed to be biology. Let's just ignore the fact that these are literally the exact same thing. You're just talking about the different environment that it's in. You stay in your lane and you stay in your lane, and everybody has a curriculum. No, I totally get that.
That's my point of view. Is throw out these old ideas of what should be in a curriculum, and you're fine. Kids are resilient, and if they know how to teach themselves, anything that you don't, for whatever reason, you manage to forget something really critical, they will figure it out. Yeah, you will just follow some of your gut on what you want to experience, and allow yourself to be creative in the things that you do. And with the technology and the things that are available today, and different groups you can do, different sports activities, there's so many different things that you can do from a learning standpoint. It's almost overwhelming, the choices you have. It doesn't have to be, I have to be a teacher. I'm going to have to go buy a bunch of workbooks, and I'm going to go give these tests to my kids.
Yeah. In fact, a lot of what's wrong with it is that thinking, is the 100%. Fact that like we are looking for that.
Right. So give yourself permission to be creative with it.
Yeah. Yeah. On that note, can you tell me the story of Huddle Up, and tell me about this game as if I am completely new to it, and because I got a rough draft version of the short version of the kind of origin story. But one thing that I think we are doing very badly, and I don't mean that in an insulting way to anybody, because I'm guilty of this as much as anyone, is we love to lecture about Bitcoin.
Oh my God.
We love to give economics lectures. We love to give monetary lectures. We love to break down monetary history, and we love to talk about terms and all of this stuff and talk about how Keynesianism is wrong. But 99% of the population does not learn that way. And I think we have failed to meet that audience where they should be met instead of where we want them to meet us. And this is why I think, like we can just say, oh, it's just a board game and, cool, that's neat. It's a thing on the side. But I disagree. I beg to differ that games are one of the most important things we can do. Story is one of the most important things we can do to teach Bitcoin and to get people to understand why this thing matters and what its purpose is. And it is a category. It is arguably vastly, vastly more important than being able to tell a good lecture. Nonfiction is not the bestseller. Fiction is the bestseller. And we have lots of nonfiction books about Bitcoin.
That's true.
So tell me the story of HODL Up and what led you to create this game and why everybody should have a copy and why you should send me a copy as well because I want one.
We're going to get you a copy of HODL Up, Channel Up, and BIP39. We're gonna stack you up with some learning opportunities for you.
I saw BIP39 right there in the background on the thing. I hadn't seen BIP39. That one's interesting.
We're launching. Well, it'll be there in Nashville, so we'll show it to you in person.
Okay. All right. Cool. I'll get to play it.
Get you a copy.
I'll give you the origin story because he's too factual.
Okay.
So he's.
I'll just preface this is that to everybody who is thinking, oh, a Bitcoin education game is yes, it's very easy to think that this could be boring and that this to make people sit down that they're going to learn a lecture about Bitcoin. But it is not. It is genuinely fun. Like it is a really fun game. The concept is simple. You want to get as much Bitcoin as possible. Every game has a simple motive. And you will learn Bitcoin not because don't ever tell anybody. If you're playing HODL Up, don't tell them they're going to learn Bitcoin. They're going to go in with the wrong mindset. Like just let them play the game and you will understand. Just play the game. But anyway. Sorry, Tali. Back to you.
Yeah. So this whole thing started a few years back when I was in the process of graduating our 4 kids from high school. And as a homeschooler, you are simultaneously principal, nurse, counselor, guidance counselor, teacher. You're all of it, right? So when they're graduating and the job is help them research schools, do the transcripts, help them prep them for the standardized tests, etc. It was a really busy time for me. Right around that time was when he started to hear people talk about Bitcoin on podcasts. We had heard about Bitcoin earlier, but we don't have a computer background, so we really struggled with understanding why it's important and what it actually is. But right around that time, he started hearing it, and then he would come to me and say, hey, I really think this is important. We need to teach it to the kids, but we need to understand it first. And I would say, I don't have time. I'm running around like a crazy person. The hand came up. I'm like, please stop. Because it was like every few days, hey, Tali, I just sent you another podcast. It'll be 2 hours long.
That's true.
And I'll be like, do I look like I have 2 hours to go listen to a podcast? And he'd be like, if you can just read the Bitcoin Standard, and it's a textbook. Right? I just didn't see why I should take time out of my already very busy schedule, very long to-do list to go do homework. So he kept trying. He was like, can you please just watch this video? Can you please just read this article? I'm just sending you a blog, blah, blah, all that stuff. And I'm like, please just stop bugging me with this thing. And he goes, no, it's important. And we need to understand. We need to understand.
Bitcoiner passion.
Yeah.
For the sake of our children, that's like always his like secret weapon. It's for the good of the kids. So anyway, so he said, I'm going to put it in a physical form. And he was trying to explain to me the blockchain technology. And he was using like SHA-256 and nonce and cards and all this stuff. And he's moving stuff around, mahjong tiles and playing cards that he marked up. And he's like, do you understand now? And I'm like, no. Everything sounds like Greek. What is this SHA-256 thing? And he's like, well, it's a mathematical equation. This is the equation. I'm like, no.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
No, thank you. But anyway, so he went back and he kept trying. And every time he took out another prototype, it was like, oh my God, it's another prototype. And he went back and forth with his brother, who's not a Bitcoiner, tested it with our son, who loves board games.
But not a Bitcoiner.
And not a Bitcoiner. And all the time he would be coming to me and say, do you understand now? Do you understand now? And finally, it got to the point where I understood enough to believe that it's a real thing, because I honestly could not see something digital being money. I just couldn't see zeros and ones. How can that be money?
A lot of people have problems with that. It doesn't compute, you know?
It doesn't compute. But he got me to the point where I finally gave him, like, I will listen to one of your darn books, right, on Audible. And I started listening to it, and I would get so angry, and I would come home and tell him about it, because I would listen to it when I'm at the gym. And he'd be like, I don't remember that from the Bitcoin Standard. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm listening to this book, and this is what the guy is saying. He goes, which book are you listening to? And I pulled it up, and it wasn't the Bitcoin Standard. It was Bitcoin, Hard Money You Can't F With.
Which is funny because Tali doesn't cuss.
Oh, yeah.
It was all emotions. This guy
Stories
is short, and it was all emotions. And I got so stirred up. I was so angry. It took me several months to finish a very short book, because I had to stop, because he was challenging me so much on everything I believed was true and good. And I was teaching to our kids proactively, because we really care about money literacy. So we went out of our way to teach our kids money literacy when we were homeschooling. And right at the time when they were graduating, and we've really instilled all these beliefs in them.
That's Jason Williams' book, isn't it?
It is Jason Williams, yeah. And
he's actually in. I think he's actually in my area. I was set to chat with him at some point, and that fell through.
Oh, I'd love to meet him someday, just to say, look what you did to my wife.
And because I was so angry about it, I ended up doing more reading, and that's how I went down the rabbit hole. But I think had I listened to the Bitcoin Standard, because I listened to all my books first, I don't think I would have had the same emotion reaction.
That's just it's such a great example, right?
So I don't think I've actually read this book. I've had it in my list for quite some time, but so he does a good job of like framing it with story,
I just remember getting angry. Like, he stirred me up.
Getting angry in a good way, right?
That's a great point, though, is story. And I also think it's a great point with what we talked about earlier. People learn differently. I have an engineering degree, and I like the podcast, and I want the books, and I want to understand that. Tali wants that emotion. So if you're gonna reach her, it's got to be different.
I have to know why I should care before I will do the research, because Bitcoiners would say, don't trust, verify. That's a really big ask for a non-Bitcoiner to do, because you're talking about hundreds of hours of research, investigation, listening to podcasts, reading books. That's a really big ask. Yeah. Unless they're committed because they believe that they will either be harmed by not listening to it or be helped by listening to it. People like me, we would rather go watch Netflix. Yeah. Because our lives are busy, But anyway, so it took him 2 years. And he finally, through interacting with me, working with his dedication, and just going, it was just prototype after prototype. And we have one picture of our son, because we have 4, right? So 2 boys, 2 girls. So one son is super into board games. He helps Scott the whole time. And the other son is like, I don't care. He's our computer programmer. He's not a board gamer. And I have a picture with him going like this over the prototype. And on that day,
oh my God,
he argued with Scott for an hour over the first sentence of the instruction booklet.
We never even played.
And they never played the game at all.
We just completely butted heads. Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah. So 2 years to get it from him trying to explain to me with some mahjong piles to the huddle up that you see today.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
So just so for background, yes, we met in business school. So this idea of teaching about money, and certainly as we were learning, making our own mistakes, we wanted to teach our kids to be better off. So money literacy had to be there. I also grew up with, I love mechanical puzzles. I love games, like tabletop games, the fellowship aspects. That's the whole game schooling side of things is it's a deep subject. There's a lot to it. So I was surprised that there was no game yet already. And I know that the Shamrock was out, and it was just that's geared towards a younger audience. I was looking for something more on like the Catan level, where you could also play with adults. So as I was learning Bitcoin, I was thinking to myself, how do I put this into a game? And it did. It started with Mahjong tiles. I'm trying to show Tali how a transaction works and who sends it to who. Eventually went to dice and then the cards. It took this progression, but I wanted it to be two things. One, it had to be fun because we played Cash Flow and Cash Flow 101 and even Cash Flow 202 with the kids. This is the Robert Kiyosaki.
Yeah.
Rich Dad Poor Dad. And which is, it will teach the three main financial statements to someone, but it is pulling teeth. It is not fun. So I wanted, it's like a Disney movie where there's adult jokes and kid jokes and you laugh at the same time, but it may be for different reasons. I wanted a game that was both fun by itself that you would play, but I also wanted it to be actually from an education standpoint, I wanted it to be true to the Bitcoin ethos. And this was why it took so long to make, because I was trying to learn Bitcoin. So for example, I would go to my brother, I'd take out a prototype, and at the time I was trying to work on different variations of how I would work in 21 million into a game that you could play in 45 minutes. So how many tokens, in other words, do you need? Is 21 too little? 2,100 is too many? So how do I balance what this is? And I had the halvings in there, of course. And one of my early games, I had it where anybody could send a transaction to anybody. And as I was learning Bitcoin, I'm like, well, no Bitcoiner in their right mind would ever sign off on that. So I took that out. And my brother said, well, now your game sucks because whoever gets the first, no, he's pretty blunt. Whoever wins the first block or
That's
two.
what brothers are good for.
Yeah, they are. No one will know the importance of playtesting. This is kind of like free and open source software kind of thing. Why you need multiple minds. And he said it sucks because whoever gets the first few blocks, nobody has any chance for the rest of the game. It's just not fun. And I said, well, if you do what you're saying, it's not true to Bitcoin ethos. So this was one of the biggest hurdles. But what the result of that was splitting the player card or the wallet into a hot and cold side. So that if your Bitcoin was on the cold side, it was protected, which was what I was trying to do. And if it was on the hot side, you're vulnerable to some type of attack. And that's where you could defend yourself and you introduce some entropy with the die. So basically what I'm describing though is this 2 years that Tali talked about was a learning process, not only in making the game with feedback, it was also me trying to learn Bitcoin. And then other questions would come up that I didn't know the answer to. And he'd say, well, can I send it myself? And I go, I don't know. And then I would go find out about how you might manage your XTO, what do you call it? Your UTXOs, or it might be a coin join or some other. And it turns out you can send it yourself. But I didn't know that at first. And so I would go back, and it was this iterative process, back and forth. And then at some point, Tali just challenged me. It's sort of a put your money where your mouth is. We tell the kids you can do anything. What are you going to do with this game? What are you going to do with it? Well, maybe I should make it and sell it. So then went down the path of actually figuring out how to source it. And that got into the design work. And that's a whole separate discussion too on designing a physical product and bringing it to market. But that's the origin of it.
Right. And if we go back to the fun factor, I think we were talking to someone in Europe even, and he's a professional board game designer. And we were chatting about bringing Hot up to Europe, and he said, here's the thing. When you put the word education in front of a game, people automatically assume it sucks and it's boring.
Yep.
So you can't, if you're going to Europe, take that out. It's just a game. And the wonderful thing is that we have had kids as young as 5 years old play, up all the way to 80 some years old. So like a really wide age range. And the common feedback we get is it's just fun. If you don't talk Bitcoin at all, you just play the game. So we've had families where the young kids, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-olds would play back-to-back games, just back-to-back. Like one family played 8 times in one Sunday afternoon because they were just like, I wanna get more Bitcoin. And it's like music to our ears, right? It's gotta be fun. It's gotta be fun. It can't be a lecture in disguise. It can't just be keeping score of your correct answers. It's actually just a fun game, interactive game.
And it's a bridge. So just to connect the dots, where I think you're going. So for free market kids, our goal is not to be a single game. So I have the channel up game.
Actually, hold that thought. No. Finish what you're doing. I'll come back to this. This can be a follow up.
Yeah. This is. I knew we were going to have a lot of fun. So the vision is not just to be a single game company. What happens is you have 2 groups. If you go and you're playing with people who don't know anything about Bitcoin, you're just playing a game. And we have great stories where people said, "Oh, now I finally could visually see the halving, or I could visually understand this difficulty adjustment, or whatever it is that they're doing." If I'm playing with only Bitcoiners, it gets competitive. They want to put real sats in there. They are talking smack. It is all over. But I
may or may not have contributed to that.
Yeah, you may. Yes.
I'm such a bad smack talker.
All right. So the bigger vision though is because it's a bridge where you can play it in both. You can do both of these things. It actually is a great tool for education. And so, from a low time preference perspective, in this education homeschooling umbrella that we've been talking about, there are so many other ideas I want to share with the kids. The channel up game is about lightning. BIP 39 obviously is based on seed phrases. But if you think about energy literacy, think about food literacy, think about all the different things that we get into as Bitcoiners. And my head explodes with, how do I incorporate those into a game? So our prototype we have right now that I'm going to launch in 2025 is actually called Fed Up. So we're going to talk about, of course, the Fed, right? So it's now I can play on the words too. Hodl up, channel up, Fed Up. So
yeah.
That's where we're going. It's more than just a game. You use it as you want. If you just want a family game for fun, then great. If you want to do it because education, then great. If you want to go talk smack at your Bitcoin meetup, I want you to have fun. And there's benefits to the fellowship of being together. And I think we can make a huge, huge impact. And the last thing, if I could just touch on the story of Hodl Up and where it's going, is the game itself, the mechanics of working out how it works. I can put that into any art form. So if you look at the original one, and if you look at the current board, when you buy the cardboard standard version, it looks like Catan hexagons. People will say, hey, that looks like Catan. If you look at every year I'm going to do a high-end game. This year's is the 24 halving edition. I made that with metal, handmade box that opens in 2. It is sweet collectors, but it looks like you're in a casino. Mm-hmm. So I think I have them here. So then
it's right there. It's 2 year. Oh wait.
We're going to show you something.
I'm going to show you a couple things. Okay. So then I got, you can take, this is going back to, okay, so this is the original. I took out the wrong one. This is kind of the original.
That's the one that's the Catan version, right?
This is kind of the,
yeah.
Yep. Then constantly people are asking about, hey, why not Bitcoin Monopoly? And I'm like, well, Bitcoin's not Monopoly.
Yeah.
The only difference between this and that of the others that you've seen is I basically took the issuance schedule and I put it into squares instead of hexagons. Mm-hmm. And I added some colors. The game mechanics are exactly the same. You still have your halvings. It's exactly the same. And then we were talking about other languages.
Well, also for people who are like, oh, I can't possibly understand Bitcoin. And you say, well, do you play Monopoly? Yes, I do. Take that out. You're basically lowering their guard, right? You're like, this looks familiar. You can do it. You can understand it. And then, All
right. So this is a prototype of doing it in Spanish. So this is inspired by the game Loteria and also Mexican Train. So the difficulty dial is no longer a dial. It's actually a little train that sits on your board, sort of like what you do, going back and forth.
Yeah.
And just made it look like that. And to Tali's point is, we can now take this and put it into whatever format is most familiar to people, because part of the bridge of reaching people is breaking down those barriers and
meeting them where they are.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
If I present this first board to my parents, I mean, what the heck is it's just it's overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
I make it look like Monopoly. Oh, wait, okay. There's things that it is different. It is a different game, but we can have fun with this. We can put this into a lot of different formats, but the mechanics are all there. The Bitcoin basics aren't changing. They're there, right? The difficulty dial, the hot and cold wall, all these basics are there. So now we can get into these other areas, like these other games, and we can have fun with this, experimenting with this current format. Maybe someday make it digital. Who knows, right? I mean, it could be there's a lot of different things you can do with it. You can have a lot of fun with this. But I'm most passionate about making an impact because I do want to have fun. I love games. I love geeking out on games. However, when we think about the significance of teaching these things to other people and reaching people and getting them to open up and meeting them where they are, in whatever form that is, it's a huge icebreaker. It's a huge way. Mm-hmm. Actually, Tali, you should probably tell a story. There's
it's a Trojan horse. It's a Trojan horse.
It is a Trojan horse. We've had so many customers give us feedback on just the conversations that they were able to start. So, for example, someone said he was playing with his mom in her 70s, and she's been really reluctant to talk about Bitcoin because in her mind, it's something she cannot possibly understand. So she's just playing this board game, and then she started asking questions. She's like, "What is this halving business? What is that?" And then he gets to tell her in a state of mind that is open for the answer. If you just go up to her and you're like, "Let me tell you about the halving," she's going to be like, you know what? I get,
why would you do this? Please.
Right. But if you're playing the game, like the difficulty dial, the difficulty adjustment, how do you explain that to somebody who's not a computer geek to make them understand? But you play the game, you're like, is this real? Like, yes, that's actually real. And then suddenly you're like, oh, I can actually understand what you guys are talking about. Yeah. And just to give you a story, since we love stories, we went to a Bitcoin event and we were supposed to get some kind of technical talk and discussion. And now on that day, for some reason, the internet wasn't working and they couldn't do the presentation. It was supposed to be a demo. And we happened to have our game there. People were already gathered. We're like, well, we have the game. Do you guys want to play? And there was a couple there. And the guy is very, very technical, like to the extreme, like the nth degree technical. He understands Bitcoin. He's been in it for a long time. And then his girlfriend was there with him. And you could just tell from her face that she was completely detached. She didn't understand anything. She was there purely to support him. And she was just very non-engaged. You can see in her body language, her face was very closed off. And she's like, I can't possibly play that game. I don't understand Bitcoin. I'm not going to play. And her boyfriend is like, no, I'm going to talk you through it. I'm going to explain things to you and we can play together because we were all sitting at the table. And then, so he's the whole time, he's whispering into her ears about what to do and, what kind of transaction to do. Do you buy a miner and all of that stuff? Well, by midway game, her hand came up like this, literally.
What is
came
it with
up
the
like
hand?
this. I don't know. It's a thing. It's a thing. The hand came up. He's trying to tell her what to do. She goes, I got it. I know what to do.
Wait. Hold on. It was worse than that. When we first started playing, there were a couple technical guys there, and they were vomiting Bitcoin facts on her. They were just. Oh God. It's the worst. And we're like, just we're guests. So we're kind of in this position of, maybe we should say something, but we're here as a guest, right?
Is this my place? I don't know.
More and more and more, and she was already really fearful.
Right. So it was. I was so grateful. There was another guy there who was watching both her reaction and them, and he was a regular attendee. So he turned to them, and he was like, "Shut the f up, f and play," and that was it. But he did, and the lesson for me too, I'll let Tali finish this though, is that I have to be really careful because I'm one of those guys that gets all excited and wants to do that. And I was like, is that what I look like? I'm like, oh my God.
Anyway,
you see yourself from the outside suddenly, and you're like, oh no, what have I done?
Yeah, scary and ugly.
Yeah. So midway through the game, her hand came up and she understood what was happening. By the end of the game, she had won, which I'm sure really helped, made her really happy. And she said, I want to buy this game. I want to buy it with Bitcoin, and I don't want you to do it for me. I want you to show me how to do it, and I want to do it. And from completely closed off, wanting nothing to do with it, to show me how to make a transaction,
to like, I want to do this myself. That's
myself.
amazing.
45 minutes.
That's amazing.
Because it just removed the mental block. And since then, we've had so many women, I don't know what it is about men and women, but so many women come up to us to say that the games help them put the pieces together.
Yeah.
And they clicked into place when you get to interact with it.
The Bitcoiner guys tend to say, I've never seen it look so in your face. It's so visceral. I've never seen the halving look so visceral. So in the game, for those that haven't played it, you have a couple halvings. And I always make it a point to announce to everybody when you're in the last block of the epoch, because it's going to get harder. And for real, it's very visual. And then the difficulty is very visual. The hot and cold, it's all. And so I hear that the women, this is completely stereotypical, it's more about just opening up to Bitcoin in general than what it is. And for the men that are already in Bitcoin, it's more of, wow, that presentation of it, there's so many things in there. Every block is linked to the last block. And whatever, fill in your blank of what it is that grabs you. There's usually some type of comment of someone saying, hey, I've been in mining a long time, but this is the first time that I've really seen how these connect. There's something about that.
We had this one guy come up to us after his girlfriend or wife played, and he said, I'm so happy because after she played the game, she said, we need to go buy some more Bitcoin.
There's the best testament.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, all right. So, Guy, I completely cut you off earlier. You were about to say something there. What was
I was curious in a general sense, did free market kids develop from the game, or was this more homeschooling and then the game became part of it? Like how broad is free market kids versus the game specifically?
No, free market kids started much earlier. My first game was actually about pricing, and it's called "Is That the Best You Can Do?" And it's when I made that, our youngest, the one that was fighting me, argued with me for an hour later on Huddle Up. I think he was 6, 7, and we were worried. The thought was, how do we get him to negotiate with his older siblings? He's going to be intimidated. So we told him that if you get stuck, just say, is that the best you can do? Well, he turned into like a monster with it, and he would just yell, and he had no problems dealing with older siblings, it turned out. Then that just turned into the name of the game. And then I didn't really do anything. I was working my fiat job. I didn't really do much with it. Huddle Up came, and then the first time we ever played it with Bitcoiners was at Bitcoin Park. And that's when everybody else I had played it with was just taking my word for it that it was based on Bitcoin.
Family and friends, basically.
So,
yeah.
And then we were labeled Free Market Kids it's synonymous with Huddle Up. From my point of view, we have a much bigger mission that we're on regarding education, money literacy, and I have so many other ideas that I think are critical to thinking that a lot of them we mentioned earlier in the show. So you take teaching low time preference, you take energy literacy and food literacy, and there's so many other things that are just first principle based. There's so much material there for games, so much that I really want to keep going with this, and we're doing this for the kids. We're really the mission of Free Market Kids is to make the next generation successful, give them the tools to be successful. So,
well, can I back up just a little bit? Sorry.
No, you get it.
So, when we were homeschooling, we made a really big point to teach our kids, money literacy, because we both got our MBA, but we felt like we didn't really understand at all. We were taught to go into corporate, right? And so we were really, really deliberate even when the kids were really little to teach them economic principles. And in the public school system, they don't even have the option to take an economics class until high school. And I firmly disagree with age requirements for learning any subject, period. And so when our oldest was 10 or so, I said, let's just start teaching them economics. I started teaching them accounting. We were doing the history of money. Like we were doing all of that stuff. And now looking back, the way that I taught them was very much the way that I was taught, which is lecture based. Then you take a test, maybe we do a few projects or something like that. I don't know how much they remember. So when Scott created that game originally, Is That the Best You Can Do? It was our way of showing them how price moves with changes in supply and demand without having to do the lectures and then taking the test and the next day they don't remember what they learned. We wanted it to be interactive and to be hands-on and for them to be able to think on their feet because it requires some mental math and it requires you to think really fast when you are negotiating. So we wanted to create that environment and for the lessons to be derived from their own experiences, not because we told them, here's the bullet point of the lessons you should learn. Yeah. We wanted it to be lessons they learned because they had the data points to derive their own conclusions. And that's really the basis of game schooling. That's why we believe in creating games on these other topics to talk about the energy literacy and the environment literacy and the food literacy, things like that. We want people to derive their own conclusions and then compare it to what they're hearing, like the propaganda that they're hearing through social media and different, media outlets and influencers who don't know what they're talking about and they're still talking. So they can start to ask questions because until they ask questions, they're not open to answers.
So, well, it's also what Guy's already said. Guy, what you said earlier, you have to meet people where they are, and not everybody is going to be. Again, I go back to what a typical meetup looks like. Most of the people there are men. Most of them listen to all kinds of podcasts.
Very detail information oriented, which is usually a male thing anyway. But yeah.
And if we believe in Bitcoin, the importance that the impact it can have in the world, and we want to reach that, well, we're going to have to reach the moms. We're going to have to reach the kids. We're going to have to reach people who don't think the way most of the people at these events think. We have to go to where they're at. So what that means is you're going to need music. You're going to need movies. You're going to need games. You're going to need
stories.
You're going to need stories. You're going to need everything in life where someone in that area who knows that. So I happen to be games, but it's just one piece of it. We need people in every area to basically show what Bitcoin is through their area of life. We want to reach homeschoolers. We want to reach gamers. I'm also working with the veterans. Tali's doing some stuff with women. We need to follow our area that we can contribute. And so it's a much bigger picture. It's a game bigger than us. If you look at what we're trying to do. And I say that just because we've had a lot of success with Huddle Up. That's what we're known for, and we're so grateful for that. But to answer your question, our point of view is this is a much bigger. We're on a much bigger mission here, and if I can bring people together for fellowship and have fun along the way, but we're teaching these things, then that's just fantastic.
This is the Swan Bitcoin app, and this is how easy it is to just buy Bitcoin whenever you're feeling like it. And I feel like it right now. And as it shows me right here, I still have $9,388 worth of my $10,000 of Bitcoin buying that has no fees whatsoever. And now I have $10 more worth of Bitcoin. I do this quite often. One of the really great things about Swan is the incredible number of resources they have for learning and understanding anything that you want to know about Bitcoin. And importantly, they're going to teach you why you should not trade. They're not going to encourage you to trade. They are Bitcoin only. If you're looking for an easy and reliable way to get into Bitcoin, if you're looking to put Bitcoin in your IRA, if you're looking to put Bitcoin in your business, if you're looking to do anything around getting on a Bitcoin standard or getting exposed to Bitcoin in your portfolio, check out swanbitcoin.com/guy is my special link, and you will find it very conveniently right in the show notes. Dude, I'll just say kudos because for anybody who hasn't played Huddle Up, it is legit a fun game, and that's the one thing that I was not, especially just like you said, is that don't call it an educational game because you go into it, and I'll admit, every time you told me you should play this, it teaches you how to do it, Bitcoin or whatever, or it explains Bitcoin or whatever. All my thinking every time somebody, I go in tainted with the idea that this is probably going to be boring in a lot of ways because it's going to be accurate, you know, and that's typically my association. And that is a very, very hard balance to strike. And I find it fascinating that the entire origin of the game was to explain Bitcoin, and it ended up fun. And literally all it is about explaining Bitcoin, essentially, is every piece of it is Bitcoin related, which is shocking because my thinking on trying to develop a game is, okay, I would start from how do I make this fun? And how do I like make this engaging? This is kind of what I would do with a story or whatever. And then I would figure out what principle or what relationship to Bitcoin it would have. And I would focus on one or two things rather than kind of painting a broad stroke of like playing the Bitcoin system, which is really a lot more what Huddle Up is you're just in a Bitcoin set of rules. You don't know it, but you're in a set of rules that essentially you could think of as, if you wanted to dumb Bitcoin down to like 5 or 6 major pieces, and then you interact and you play in it, which is crazy.
And the game dynamics, I have to tell you, Guy, it's funny watching people like yourself who have been in the space for a long time play it, because if for those who are new to Bitcoin, you don't realize what that expression is about, going down the rabbit hole. But you need some humility, because every time you think you understand something, then you get kicked and you realize you really didn't understand it. You learned something new. And then there's something new and there's something new. And I've seen that with the game too. So for example, the difficulty dial I put in there because I wanted it to be in there, but it could really control your game. If your game's really slowing down, it's going to get easier, and vice versa. And it's like, okay, that's actually a cool mechanic for a game.
Yeah.
Hey, how about that?
There's literally self-regulation built into the game as a system of the game rule. And I remember when that was one of the most, that was the biggest points of like, that is a really cool way to use the difficulty adjustment, but to actually have it meaningfully affect the game is that, it accidentally got too hard with the card drawing, with basically what the situation is on the table. And so we can move this difficulty, and it literally just changes the requirements. It changes a critical rule of the game that makes the game easier until it becomes too easy, and then moves back in the other direction. And I was like, that's such a cool way to put the difficulty adjustment in there, where nobody has to think about the fact that it's a difficulty adjustment or anything like that. It's just, this is just the requirement. This is how you get your Bitcoin, and this is what you have to meet. That one was really like a great moment of, oh, that's a good one. That's a good one. God.
So I'm learning too, watching people play. And people will ask questions and ask to add things to it. And one of the things we had talked about previously offline was someone had asked me about doing a zero-sum Bitcoin transaction. And after playing for a year, I hadn't had that question. It just so happens we had just talked to Carlos, though, about the Guatemala election validations and use an op return where you have a zero Bitcoin transaction. And I was like, oh my God, I need to add a card with zero on this thing. And then I thought what I could teach her. And
that's who I'm talking to at 4:00 today, by the way.
Are you? Oh, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. So to your point, though, of how do you make it fun? There are so many layers to Bitcoin that I wish I could take credit for the making it fun. But Bitcoin itself just has layers and layers. And until you peel one of them, you don't even know that there is another one below it. And that's what I've seen with the game is I keep thinking that I understand what I built, and then I'll go and play with somebody, and then someone will say or do something, and I'll be like, oh my God. And it's, I think the reason it's fun is because Bitcoin's fun. There's so much game theory in the things that we talk about. It's already there. I just needed it. I put it in a format that you could physically move things around to do something with it. But all the concepts, they're all there. And if you think about Bitcoin isn't just one thing, it's actually layers of things, right? In terms of the technologies used and the ideas used. And so, yeah, I love that I built the game, but it was really the mechanics that make it fun. they're not even mine. They're just took this other stuff that was around, and I tried to put them in a form that you could move around. And so it's been so I don't want to say sobering. It's been
it's a growth experience.
It's been a growth experience because I keep thinking I understand something, and then something will happen. And I'm like, oh my, I don't. I don't have this yet.
Well, it's the same thing with this channel
humbling.
up thing. This
it's
channel
humbling. Thank you.
Humbling,
Humbling.
yes.
Yeah.
So this channel up game, he started talking about 2 years ago, I think. He started a year and a half ago. It's been a while. And he's like, I'm going to explain the Lightning channel. And that was right around the time when everybody started talking about the second layer and the second layer. I'm like, I like conceptually, I guess I can understand why it's required, but I don't understand the challenges involved. I don't understand why I can't just make any amount of payment that I want, like you're swiping a MasterCard or a Visa card. What is the problem? Why do some of the transactions fail, etc.? I didn't understand it. He's like, I'm going to put it in the game. I'm like, really? He goes, yeah. And so he started reaching out to Lightning level, what's it called? Lightning layer devs. Yeah. And he would ask questions, and he started making prototypes, and he modified and unmodified. And finally, by the time I played the prototype, it was basically done. And it was so eye opening for me because I'm like, oh, that's what they're struggling with? Because until you see it.
Let me take it out.
Yeah.
What happens in this game, just to put in context, and by the way, it turns out, quite humbling, that I find Lightning to be more complex than Bitcoin. I
totally agree.
I never understood.
Lightning was fascinating, and it took me a long time to wrap my head around it. I read that white paper like 5 times, slowly trying to piece together every item of that. And it was really Aaron von Wertum's amazing series on understanding Bitcoin. Was 3-part, long form 3-part article that really broke down the key structure, and that was the thing that really had it click for me a second time. Like I had my aha moment on the white paper, but that was the like, oh, I could actually explain this to somebody else now, but it's hard. It's hard to wrap your head around.
Again, going back to, if I went to Tali and I said, I want you to read this white paper 5 times. It's just not happening. Yep. So this, is this in there or not? These little pieces are like lightning bulbs. Okay. So what you do is you're just moving these pieces back and forth on these channels. Where am I? Mm-hmm. And so what's happening is you're actually buying and selling items, because I thought the expression where you can't buy a cup of coffee with Bitcoin. I'm like, yeah, you can. You can use Lightning. So in the game, you're pairing up there's an entity in the game that wants to buy something. It's somewhere else on the board, and the sats are physically going to flow from one part of the board to the other through the nodes. And so you have Lightning nodes that you put out, and then the item goes the other way, right? And in the process, though, each of those channels has 2 sides to it. And this was, when I first built it, I said, okay, everybody's going to start with so much, and everybody would put their stuff out. And then very quickly, I realized that no one could buy anything because everybody had outbound liquidity and nobody had inbound liquidity.
Yeah.
And then I go, oh, that's what they're talking about. So then I had to go back and I say, okay, we got to modify the game for that. And then the way that you earn the sats in the game is you route those payments through you, and you get a fee for that. And then that's how you earn enough. You have to do that to earn enough to be the first player to buy 2 pizzas with Bitcoin. So I wanted to work in some things that Bitcoiners would thought were funny. So here's the thing. It actually takes a lot of concentration to play this game, because you're trying to literally route payments, and you're splicing in and out and opening and closing channels and doing this liquidity. And it's not for the faint of heart. But I promise you, if you play it one time with me, you will understand Lightning. So that's what I did with Tali. Just play with me one time, work through this inbound, outbound liquidity and splicing and all this other stuff. This will show you what's happening with it. And that's what I say to people. I say, if you like games, you like intense games, you're good with this. But this is going to be like a level above the intensity of HODL up, because of the complexity of it.
So this one is the other direction. So this is bit 39. And this is a really fun party game. So you don't have to think too hard. We're just demonstrating entropy with this. It's kind of like asking 20 questions to figure out what the oracle has picked out. And we played it actually this weekend because our family was in for our son's wedding and they loved it. Everybody loved it. Everybody had a blast. We didn't have to talk about Bitcoin at all, but the concept is there. We can explain why 12 words would be enough to secure your cold wallet.
Yeah. So in that game, I went through the BIP39 list and I categorized them, looking for the amount that would be good for a deck. This is getting into game building stuff. And I said, oh, animals are fun. Anything that was a living creature. So I have these decks. And then one of the people, it's like Pictionary. Somebody's going to know the answer. That person puts 3 of those in order, and everybody else is asking questions to figure out not only what the 3 cards are, but the right order.
What the order of them is. Yeah.
And it takes 5 minutes to explain. So my daughters will play this anytime. If I take out Channel Up, my older son who loves games will do it. Everybody else is looking at me and running for the doors where they're at, because it's a different kind of, it's a different
level of game,
different audience. Yeah. On the other hand, it's a challenging. I feel that was almost more challenging trying to figure out how to take the concepts and put them into a 45-minute game. Because if you have to go longer than that and you're doing a European style game or something and it's a long, your audience is much smaller. And what we want is something that you literally could play at a meetup or a family game night. And that was so much harder with the Lightning. Seed Phrase was just fun.
Yeah, BIP39 would be a great meetup game.
Yeah,
it'll be so much fun.
It's very
Bring your
fast.
family, don't leave your wife and children at home. Bring the whole family into the meetup and play either Huddle Up or BIP39. I think everybody will have a really great time.
We'll show these to you in Nashville.
I was about to say, I'll see them in Nashville, I assume, right?
We'll bring copies of everything we've talked about with us. And these will also be in the game lounge. And we're happy to start getting them out in the wild and let people play with them. So
hell yeah. What's the website again? Is it just freemarketkids.com?
freemarketkids.com.
Okay, I'm going to have that. Make sure I put that in the notes too here. I got a lot of links for this one.
I made some notes here of things that we promised to give you links.
Awesome.
That we give links for. So
now the last thing, and we're getting here close to the end, but just because this is a conversation that we will be extending and we'll be talking about, because I know we're going to meet, was it like a week or two, about this specifically, is story. Game, I think, is such a great example of a game is interactive story, right? It's setting a goal, it's putting players in the environment, setting your environment, and then letting people move through it towards the goal. And that's why I think game is if you can make it engaging and fun, it's a brilliant teacher. And one of the crazy things is there's a lot of statistics and studies about people who game a lot as kids. There's actually a ton of different critical thinking scores, reaction scores, and all of these things that they actually score way higher on. And specifically if it's team games, I mean, this is why you have soccer and football. This is why you have games. They are literally microcosms of life. How do you work with someone toward a goal such that, you can achieve it together, that you can't do it by yourself? And there's so many different elements to that. And it's obviously so fundamental to who we are as humans. Even somebody who isn't even a sports person can get into a game. I am not a sports person, but if you just give me some sort of a frame of reference as to why I should root for one than another, when I'm in just a social environment, or I will sit down and watch a game. It's exciting. I do enjoy it. I understand why people are vicious game and sports lovers, but outside of that context, I usually just don't I typically just like to root for the underdog. Whoever's losing, I'm That's what I'm going to root for, because a comeback story is always more fun than just a I dominated you story. I love it for the story thing. And it's great when I'm in like a group where everybody's rooting for one team and they're winning, because I am the odd man out going like, yeah, when the other guy went, when the other guy gets a touchdown or something.
I mean, who wants to watch a Super Bowl, whether it's a blowout or any other game?
You want a tight game. Those are that's the good story. That's the one that keeps you on the edge of your seat and gives you that suspense, that engagement. And the beauty of that is just how visceral these things are tied to who we are and why it is. Like, story is the origin of our species. Like, I think you can literally tie it to why it is that we have intelligence, like the concept of intelligence and reasoning at all, is that we tell these structures of patterns about how we relate to our world and how it is that we can look long form, like we can look way out into the future and we can have something that we want to go to, and we can tell ourselves a story that we want to play out, and then we try to make it happen in the world. And every time we bump into some obstacle, or our frame of reference changes, or our environment changes, or some chaotic random event alters everything about it, we mold that story to still shape it around so that we end up on that path toward that goal. And that is storytelling. That's the crux of it. And this is why religion lasts. This is why everything, you notice, like all of our ancient texts, every one of them is a story. Yes. Every one of them. It's not a list of facts. It's a story. Everything that lasts is a story. We learn, we conceptualize, we relate to our world, we relate to ourselves, we talk to ourselves as story. That is how we learn. And it is also why the left, it's not even the left, the establishment has molded, has just kind of messed with so many people into believing a ridiculously false worldview, once you really analyze it, is because all of the stories we tell about society, about in Disney and Hollywood and everything, align with that worldview. We have been taught that worldview at 1,000 different levels from 1,000 different directions, and we have to change that story. We have to build story around a new worldview, but we have to do so without telling a lecture, because we have to tell a story. We have to tell a story, not a lecture. Not a lecture with cartoons, not a lecture with characters, but a story. And I want to get
bullet points.
not bullet points, exactly. And I think that is something that, because the Bitcoin community is largely so technically minded, is we all, even like a lot of the music, it's usually a list of, Bitcoin mottos and Bitcoin ideas, or it's still just, it's missing so much of the story element. It's missing that character arc and understanding how to tell a story. How are you guys attacking that problem? How do you, I know we've talked about this, Tali and I talked about this more specifically in one of our recent chats, but how do you guys think about that? And I know y'all are looking at gearing things toward that as well. Maybe just kind of expand on that thought for me.
I'll just kick off some of the framework. I'll let you go deep on this as your area. First of all, the emotion of story, one of the most underused tools we have, without a doubt. And that tool can be used against us too. If you look at the stories of the media, the stories of wherever, even if you don't want to get into that, you can still be manipulated by story. And there are the layers that I see it, because I'm going to be the engineer and I'm going to think about this. It starts with, what's the story that you're telling yourself? We go back earlier in our conversation and we were talking about, if you're labeled as a one thing or another early in your school career, that can carry with you. And the story you're telling yourself is huge in terms of how you perceive the world. Then you have the stories of those that are around you, and you have the stories of what do you call it? The macro world, things that you don't
Man,
know.
that's so crazy to think about. Sorry. Is that the story that you tell yourself matters more than how smart you are?
Absolutely.
How crazy is that? That the story matters more about who you think you are. About me, like, I identified as a filmmaker for a long time before I ended up going towards networking. And I remember there was this kind of moment where I had to be like, I guess I'm just not that anymore. Like so much of my life had been kind of geared towards thinking in that direction and that I was headed there. And then I also remember having a bit of a reversal on that after the technical side of things and the sysadmin sort of direction I was going brought me to Bitcoin. Then I just viciously ran, scream, tunnel, fall down the rabbit hole and ended up doing podcasting and all of this stuff just to try to do something with it because I didn't know what to do. But I was consuming all of my time with it. And then at some point after like 3 years in the podcast, I just realized I was back to media production and it hadn't even registered to me that that's what I was doing again. And now I'm back to thinking that like, okay, actually, I just took this really weird roundabout way to get back to, all right, I'm going to do film again. I'm going to tell a story again. And anyway, sorry,
well, the last
it was crazy
that's, my head's, I'm thinking about some of the other things to share. It's going to be, I'm looking forward to what you do with that, the stuff that you're working on. Real quick before I hand it off to Tali, the last thing that I'm thinking about with story though is, and especially what you just highlighted on the story you tell yourself and what the impact is. Let's go back to the whole topic we were talking about today, which is education. How are you teaching your kids about the story that they're telling themselves and being very, very in tune to what are you telling them is their self-worth and how they solve problems and how they do it, because they're picking up on that. And that will be one of the biggest things that influences them in terms of being anti-fragile, successful, happy in the future is the story. And that is a really fundamental piece of education. And it's not something you can put into a curriculum, I don't think. It's part of the parenting role in education. So that's where I'll leave the story, and then you go into the much deeper. This is Tali's area.
Because I'm more of a feeling person, and he's more like we're one brain versus the other brain, right? Versus that kind of thing. But the way I see it is the whole world is vibration, right? Everything you see is vibration, even something that's solid as a rock. If you go way into the atoms, you're really looking at a whole lot of space. And so everything is vibration. Everything is energy. And what is feelings? Feelings are emotions. What is emotions? Emotions have been described as energy in motion. So if we want to influence someone, the best way to do it is to draw out strong emotions, because now you have strong energy flow. We were reading a book by the guy who did Dilbert, the Dilbert cartoon, Scott Adams. And I think the book was something about feeling big or something. And he was talking about Trump being a master manipulator.
Oh, yeah.
But what does he do, though, whether you're for Trump or against Trump? He can draw emotions out of people like nobody else, whether you love him or hate him, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Why? Because he's moving energy. So when we are trying to orange pill people, when we're trying to share Bitcoin education, the biggest tool in our tool belt is to draw out strong emotions. And what is the best way we can do that is, of course, storytelling. And I remember reading a book, I think it's called The Story Brand, and they were referencing a picture taken years ago by an anthropologist, Win Bigley, I think was the book.
Win Bigley.
Win Bigley. Scott Adams was talking about that. But it was a picture of an indigenous group of people in the Amazon forest, I think. And it was a group of kids. Everybody's naked because these are tribal people. So there's one elder in the middle of the circle and all these kids sitting around him with their eyes up, like looking at him, because they were all enthralled by the story that he was sharing of their tribal traditions and things. Now, what do kids learn today? They always learn through textbooks where everything is very like neutral. and fact-based and memorize the dates and stuff like that. Like, no, that's not how you move energy. We want to move energy as Bitcoiners. And so one of the projects that I'm working on right now with our daughter, actually, she's my illustrator, and I'm writing the stories. We're gearing very young kids, but honestly, like sneakily, we're trying to reach the moms who are reading the story to the kids. It's very simple stories, but we really want the characters to draw out some kind of empathetic energy from the child. So we want the character to be vulnerable. We want the character to meet some challenges, and then some kind of solution happens. And in the middle of telling that story, while the most emotions are going, which means energy is moving, we kind of throw in nuggets about stuff that we care about as Bitcoiners. We don't have to come out and say, hey, Bitcoin or fiat bad, Bitcoin good. We don't have to do that. I think currently a lot of our way of telling a Bitcoin story is immediately to the one side is better than the other, but there's so much more nuance in that. Like what you guys are saying, there's so many layers to it. And so first we draw people in so that we can, with their emotion, with their feelings, so we're moving energy. And then while their energy is moving, because they're drawing to the narrative and they identify with the character, then you put in nuggets that make them start to think along the lines, like kind of like leaving breadcrumbs and guiding them to the gingerbread house. So that's what we're working on right now. And currently the project is geared toward younger kids that are just starting to read. But eventually what I would like to do is to write something like a Harry Potter kind of like elementary school level book that would be more engaging for kids that are reading chapter books, but then really, again, following that same formula. You got to move their energy. You got to draw emotion. So that hero's journey by Joseph Campbell, like following that kind of storytelling outline, that's what we're going after.
Sweet.
Yeah, there's a lot of competition too. You're talking about books, but the drawback about video is it's so easy to give the kid an iPad or whatever.
Yeah.
It's I would think this is going to be one of those things that start with one thing, get the stories out in the world, and then think about what other forms we can put those same stories in to help reach more people.
Can I just add one more thing? There's a difference between reading and seeing it in your mind's eye versus watching something and just being a passive receiver of the information. And so when you're reading a story, especially when they're younger and they're interacting with their parents, you can add as a parent a lot of nuggets in just sitting together and hugging them. And, it's nighttime and maybe they've got a bottle or something, or their blankie. And there's so many things you can add to the feeling that we're creating. And in their mind's eye, whatever they're seeing is always going to be more powerful than what they see out there. Like what you're saying, what they believe in themselves, the stories that they tell themselves will always trump the stories that other people are saying out there. And so that's what we want to capture. We want to capture that special moment. We want to move their energy, and we want to put in nuggets of information.
Yeah. Yeah. There's something to, I'm actually going to go back to the very first thing that you said. The idea that everything is vibration and that everything is like a mixture of, like, I've always felt that sense of enlightenment, that sense of that feeling of true engagement is a form of harmonizing with the energy around you. And I don't mean that in like kind of a woo-woo sense. I mean it in that, like, there are embedded pathways, patterns that literally exist because you would die without them in our mind. And this is why we have fundamental reasoning ability, is because the evolution of this species, the billion-year history, we have literally bashed our face up against reality until we have created pathways that lead to life continuing to exist. Like, that is the process of life, is creating a vibration that is persistent, that continues to move, grow, and adapt to its reality. And that everything is actually the illusion of solidity. Like you said, is that when you look at something, it's actually most of, like, what I'm looking at on my computer is actually empty space. But what is happening is that there are vibrations and patterns that are so cohesive that are so sustained and so intertwined with itself and moving with such an enormous amount of energy that if something tries to get into that vibrational, like tries to interrupt that pattern, that it just knocks it away. It refuses to change because it is so in harmony with itself. That is what creates the illusion of solidity. And we are actually that same thing. We actually have that same relationship with ideas. And I think that's why ideas move as waves through social environments. And why a powerful idea can just explode is because it aligns us in a way that everybody hates dissonance. Everybody hates cognitive dissonance. We freak out. Like, people will literally commit suicide to not have to change their worldview out of this weird sense of self-preservation to not have to deal with reality when they have moved too far in one direction, when they have put too much energy in an incorrect and an unharmonious concept towards in a relationship to reality or relationship to other people. And it is genuinely damaging. It is world shattering. I have moments in my life in which I have literally broken down, just being like, everything I thought was a lie, trying to come to terms with that. How many times I've run this pathway through my brain and made some assessment that was based on something that was false. It's hard. It's awful. It's an awful feeling. But at the same time, it is this crazy kind of feeling of rebirth, because I'm changing those patterns to actually align with something that is real. And that is what story does. Story is a pattern of life. But it's a pattern of experience, it's a pattern of social relationship, which is what we are fundamentally as people. We are an incredibly social species, to the point that we will die without social engagement. Like, if you take an infant and you don't give it love, it literally dies. That's crazy. You can give it all the sustenance you want, but if it does not feel that it has some sort of a story, if there's no story that it can begin to build for itself, that it is loved by something, that there's a reason, that there's a goal for something, it will wither up and not exist anymore. That is the source of life, which is insane to think about. And meeting people on that, like just touching a little piece of that in telling the story of a child learning something simple, of making a friend, of accidentally doing something bad for a friend and then making up for it, I love the little story. I'm not going to go into it or describe it or whatever. The story you told me of, like, breaking something of your mom's and then trying to make it right. Basically, what I was getting at with my kind of ridiculous rant there for a second was that was also the foundation of teaching. It's how people learn, and as we've said throughout this conversation, it's how we should be meeting them. And I really think we've missed, or at least maybe I shouldn't frame it like that we've like failed or we missed, but that we have an extraordinary opportunity to retell the Bitcoin story differently than we have. And I also think this is the stage of Bitcoin's adoption, or Bitcoin's story, so to speak, in which we should be doing that, in which that is the direction we need to take and the path we need to be looking at. And I think you guys, like, I know a lot of people just think of, Huddle Up is just like a cool little game, and, kids' stories are great, and all of this stuff. Everybody loves music and stories, but I think it's a lot bigger than people commonly assume, and that it's also a lot more important, that we need more people with that mindset and moving in that direction. And specifically why I wanted to have this show is to continually reiterate that, because I had a episode not too long ago on orange pilling has stopped working, and I think that's a lot of the framing as to why. I think we found most of the audience that can be lectured to, and we haven't changed. Haven't changed what we're doing. So and I think you guys are on the right track. So yeah, just I guess a kudos to that.
Well, we appreciate it.
Thank you.
We're really enjoying meeting other like-minded people. And we have just met so many amazing people, and they come from such different traditional backgrounds, but all had this common theme of freedom and all these things that you can feel when you're with other Bitcoiners. And I agree with you. We are at a stage, though, that Bitcoin is at a stage that to get to the other people in the world we haven't reached yet, it is not going to be the same way that we got here. It'll be personal experiences. It'll be story people's personal experiences. It'll be movies and music and games and all these other things that will come together. There'll be stories about countries, stories about companies. These all become almost urban myth, and they become part of the fabric of the story. And people, they just listen to different stories. Not everybody follows MicroStrategy. Okay, but if you're an investor, you're probably aware. You're probably aware of it going on, right? I mean, homeschoolers, yeah, it's an election issue now. What is this weird thing? Why are they even talking about it? Okay, well, the Overton windows shifted just a little bit, and now someone's going to fill in the story. Whether they're right or wrong, who knows? But the story's there. So I think it is going to be an exciting wave to see to be able to contribute to what people have to learn from.
Yeah.
So
it's almost like a race too. You're racing against time, and all the people who are against it. You really need to find out a way to mass educate, but do it delicately and very strategically.
I don't know if I agree with that. I think if you take the low time preference view, slow and steady teaching will prove out over the long run.
Well, I'm only referring to the fact that our freedom is under attack. And the more aware people are of these principles, the more likely we can stand our ground. That's what I'm referring to. Not necessarily Bitcoin adoption, because that's part of the picture, but it's not the whole picture.
Right. Right. Well, and you also don't need 100% adoption. You need enough people being noisy and standing up and not accepting what the attacks on the freedom.
Yeah.
That, we need to that'll be enough to.
We need to move an intransigent minority, and we specifically don't need to lecture and get them to listen. We don't want them to, think they made a good grade on their Bitcoin homework. We want them to be moved. We want them to know the meaning and why. And it's amazing how many stories just in Bitcoin we could tell. I mean, what kind of psychotic underdog story is MicroStrategy? I know. That would make a great story.
I actually do think there are stories out there, but you have to be right now. You have to search them out. So if you search out the Human Rights Foundation type stories, those will get emotional. But if you are not already aware of what Bitcoin is, it's not on your radar. You have to. So what is a story that starts to break into the Overton window of someone who's not there yet, that helps them see this other side? Right. I do think that there are a lot of stories building, but it's how do you package it up in a way that you can you can get that to other people who aren't already there yet. Right. All of us seeing the story. I don't know. I don't know exactly what it is, but if everybody does if every Bitcoiner does something in the area that they're focused on, then I think we move forward. If we just stay on social media and try to outshout each other, not so much. But if you build a podcast and we build a game and somebody else builds whatever they're building, right, and just everybody in their area, it could be financial services, wallets, artwork. If everybody is building, that's ground up kind of thing. We'll move it. I think and the thing about the games guy is that I didn't understand why someone else didn't already have the game.
Yeah.
And then I go onto Geyser or somewhere else, and it turns out a lot of people who have ideas for Bitcoin games. The difference is you have to ship. You have to go and make it, and it's not easy. So if you decide to make a movie, it won't be easy. But if it's not you, then who? Right? Somebody has. If it's not there already, then there's obviously it's a challenging thing to do. Yet it's almost the proof of work type of thing in a different form. It's the resolve and the grit to keep shipping and keep shipping and keep shipping.
Yeah.
That's the.
If it was easy, someone else would have already done it, and almost anything that is meaningful is necessarily difficult, because for it to be meaningful, it means that it has to have an impact. It has to be something that people aren't doing. Yeah. It becomes less meaningful if it's just something that everybody can easily get or is just already there. You know? So,
from an education standpoint, I would leave it just to encourage people that if they're thinking about having a family or already have young kids, or even if for those that have older kids, you can always take some action within the things that you can control. And you may not be able to do 100% homeschooling, or there may be something else that you don't have access to resource-wise, but it doesn't mean that you're helpless. And I do think that one of the biggest things you can do is reach out to a community, whether it's the Bitcoin community, the homeschool community, whatever it is. There are people that can help you. You're not alone on it. There's resources out there. So I would like to leave on a positive, reassuring note from an education standpoint. Yeah, we highlighted a ton of bad things. We probably could have gone on for another hour with the bad things there, but there's a lot of reason to be optimistic. The tools that we have, the passion that people we have, and if you have community to help when you have your down days, that community, that safety net, if you will, and then you help others when they're down, and you help each other through the storm, so to speak. I would leave it as it's not too late. It's not impossible. It is a lot of work, but it's worth it. And go for it. Reach out for questions. If you can have fun along the way, that's awesome. If you can be a creator, that's awesome. If that's not where you're at, then it's still okay. Not everybody has to be king creator to be part of this.
So I just want to remind everyone who is just at the point where you are, Guy, where your kids are young and you think about homeschooling, and it seems like what you said, it's like an open field. There's so many options, all these different ways to go. What I keep telling my kids is you have the right to change your mind. Mm-hmm. You can always pivot. You try something. If it works, great. If it doesn't work, pivot. And then you pivot again and you pivot again, and that is okay. You don't have to be perfect. We threw out a lot of resources. You don't have to use any of them. Just have fun with your kids, and you'll know. You just keep pivoting. You always have the right to change your mind. If it's not for you, sending them to school is not going to be the end of the world either, because there are a lot of other things you can do as a parent as well. So
yeah,
that's a good point.
Yeah, there's light at the point.
Yeah. All right.
And thank you, Guy, for taking the time to go into this subject. We obviously love these subjects. So
I love it. I love it.
And
awesome, man.
Yeah.
Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for putting up with my technical difficulties, and my having to go pause and talk to the contractor.
That's all.
And why don't you let people know where they can find you? The links that we're going to put in the show notes, what are those? So they can check it out and check out the game as well.
It's freemarketkids.com, and that should lead you to our podcast. It should lead you to my women's initiatives, which is Orange Hatter. You can also go directly there if you're a woman, and it's orangehatter.com. And I do have a weekly reading club. We have a mastermind group. We have an annual retreat. We have an intention experiment that I'm playing with, and it's just, get involved, get in a community. If you have any questions.
Yeah. And we can put the show to primarily freemarketkids.com, and that's also our handle on Twitter. We'll send you the Nostr link. We're going to be in Nashville. We love meeting people in person. If you can attend the unconference, that would be fantastic. If not, we're going to have a game lounge, and we're going to be in the Bitcoin Citadel at the big conference. We'd love to actually talk to people in person. We can help somebody with it. And the game that we talked about today, we're very excited about that. And it's also this, I'm never going to make that game again. And so I would just encourage everybody, I'll make a different version next year, but then the cardboard version will make forever. But I would highly recommend that if you like gaming and you have a low time preference, grab one of those before they're gone. They're, as a gamer, I love them, and I'm love guy that that's the first game that you got to play of ours was on that. So I would actually like to play against you, because I didn't get to play. I just got there.
Let's do it in Nashville. Let's do it in Nashville. I'm coming for you, Scott.
Sure.
I'm coming for you.
Yeah, you're coming. They're letting me set up one in the deep too, so we can. Depending on, we have multiple places where it'll be: Bitcoin Citadel, the Game Lounge, and the Deep. So
nice.
That's going to be exciting. And then my email is scott@freemarketkids.com. Some people prefer the more traditional way of reaching out. If you don't want to do, if you have any questions on the games, if you have questions on homeschooling, if you have anything like that, we just ask, whatever we can do to help others, we'd like to help.
Nice. Yeah, and my email is just Tali@freemarketkids.com. So very simple. Scott@freemarketkids, Tali@freemarketkids.
Nice. Awesome. Well, dude, thank you again so much, and we will close it out. I hope you guys enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. And this is a topic that I'm really super passionate about, and then also just very concerned with personally from the context of my son growing up. And I want to, feel like I have a frame of reference, like a strong idea as to how to go about that. And also, I just think we've just missed the story boat. Not that we don't have any opportunity, that quite the contrary. Like, all the opportunity is still there. It's just that I think we are not properly utilizing that tool. And so I want to constantly encourage people to take advantage of that and think about it from that context. That story is how we learn. Story is how we relate to our world, is how we build our worldview. And we need to tell more stories, especially when the legacy establishment, they're failing so bad at telling stories. Like, the opportunity could not be greater. The need for good stories is there. So my call to action to you guys is to check out the links that we have a lot of links in the show notes to a lot of stuff. But then also write a story. Write a short one. Just put something together in your mind, get it down on paper, get it down in a note, as short as you can. And this is going to be a call to action to me too, because we actually have a conversation happening very soon about this. And I'm going to put in my proposal. I'm going to have a story fleshed out that is largely fleshed out already, but really the pieces have not been properly put together in the order of a story. And I should have done that a long time ago. I know my brother gives me hell about it all the time because he really likes the story. So this is kind of my own call to action, but for anybody else who's ever had that inkling to just get something down, that you had a really good story in your mind, you have a really good story that you think is related to Bitcoin, or that teaches some element about Bitcoin, but then also teaches some value that aligns with Bitcoiners, that Bitcoiners would see, that long-term perspective, that thinking locally, not globally, thinking about your situation, not expecting the rest of the world to do something for you, but What can I do to make my life better? If you have those stories and you've been wanting to put those down, take this as the opportunity. Say, well, Guy told me to do it, and Guy said he was going to do it for his, so I have to do it now. That's the call to action for today's show. And then check out all of the links. Literally, there's a ton of stuff. Trying to make sure that I've got every single one of them in the show notes. But if there's anything that you've specifically caught on from the show and it's not there, just let me know. I'll add it in. That's one of the things you can edit on YouTube and in the podcast later. So just hit me up, DM me, or tag me on Noster. I'm always on Keat and stuff. Check it out. So with that, thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you for checking out Swan Bitcoin and for buying Bitcoin and for sending it to your cold storage and your cold card hardware wallet specifically so that it's safe. You know, that's something that you can do for me. And I don't mean it in the fact that like, yeah, I have an affiliate link for Swan. That's great. But buy Bitcoin for you and get it into your cold storage because that makes me happy. That makes Guy happy, literally. Do that for you and do it for me. And I will catch you on the next episode of Bitcoin Audible. Until then, guys, take it easy.